My name's Phillip Syrios. I'm obviously the third son of Bill Syrios, the brother of Andrew Syrios. I moved out to Kansas City in 2011, a little bit after Andrew did. My focus in the company is property management. I've been the property manager for Stewardship Investments, which is what we're known as in Kansas City. Most of the time we've been out here. I am also involved in the acquisition side and the finance side and things like that. It's nice to have all that working together to kind of understand what their difficulties are, what they need to get accomplished. It's nice to have all those pieces working together. So what I'm going to talk about, we have this little circle thing, all the different aspects of it. I'm going to be talking about the management part. That's what I know. That's my experience. I am not a perfect property manager. I feel like I know a lot. I'm probably not the best one in the room. If you have other questions, you can always ask Deb. She really knows her stuff. But I feel like I have a lot to add, and hopefully you can get something from this too. So let's just get into it. It's going to be about 2 hours. I will say that with property management, we could do this whole 8-hour presentation on property management. It's so critical, and it's probably the #1 place where I see people doing buy and hold investments make a mistake and fail. It always, almost always, points back to they didn't do their property management correctly. And when you don't do your property management correctly, this whole circle breaks down. So first I'm going to talk about just the importance of business management itself. So why is business management important? So you might recognize this guy. He's pretty wealthy. He has a lot of money. His name's Warren Buffett. I don't know if he's ever been the richest person in the world, but he was at least the second richest person for a long time. He owns a company called Berkshire Hathaway. It's basically a holding company for all of his purchases. So he'll go out in the marketplace, he'll find a company like Geico. He actually owns Geico, or I guess he's the major shareholder in Geico. So he bought it back in the 70s, and what he did was he was out looking for companies, and he saw this little insurance company. He liked the insurance market. He knew that niche. And this company was selling for really cheap, and he was like, you know, I think overall this company is worth a lot more than what it's selling for. So if I buy it, and then manage it well, it's going to make money over the long run. That's kind of the whole plan. So that kind of sounds a lot like what we do. We buy houses that are undervalued. He buys businesses that are undervalued. Now, why does Geico make money? Well, part of it is because of the marketing that they do. Who knows the Geico Gecko? Who knows the Geico Gecko? Who's ever heard of, you know?
Everybody knows that.
Yes, everybody knows that. Why? Because they have a really good marketing department. Now, you think Geico would do just as well if they never had the Geico Gecko? If they just put a bunch of other people who had really bad ideas that they spent a bunch of money on, they wouldn't do as well. They wouldn't make as much money. And that's the management of the company makes the company more money. Now, Geico is now worth a lot of money, mainly because it makes a lot of money.
What is stand for Geico?
What?
What is the stand for?
Government Employee Insurance Company is what it is.
It's not run by government?
No, he owns it. So, yeah, it's worth based on how much profit it can make. And so if they're running it really badly and it's losing money, it's not worth as much money. So what does Warren Buffett do? He goes out and he buys Burlington Northern Santa Fe, a big railroad, the biggest company he owns. He just recently purchased it. So he manages that one well. He also owns Dairy Queen. He has a 10% stake in Coca-Cola. He has found these businesses and bought them undervalued, kept the management really strong, and made a lot of money. If Coca-Cola was not managed well, not making a lot of money, it wouldn't be worth a lot of money. It wouldn't be doing well. His investment would be going down. It wouldn't be worth anything. Excuse me, it would be worth something, but you'd have to fire sell it at that point. You can always fire sell a house, but who wants to fire sell, and you're not going to make your return if you have to do that. You want to maximize the value of your businesses or your investments. So he keeps buying businesses. He owns Nebraska Furniture Mart, which we have one here. He owns Heinz. He owns Clayton Homes. He owns Fruit of the Loom. He owns Helzberg Diamonds. He owns See's Candy. It just goes on. NetJets. He owns all these companies. At least a major share of these companies. And so he manages them well, and they produce returns for him over time. And he bought them undervalued, and he just waited for the market. He has this concept called Mr. Market. He learned this from his mentor named Benjamin Graham. The whole concept of Mr. Market is basically the price tag on an object is not there to guide you in how much it is worth. The price tag is there to serve you. The point of the price tag is one day the price will be really high, you don't want to buy it, but the next day, Mr. Market comes to you and says, hey, you want to pay this much for it? Yeah, that looks like a good price, that's on sale all of a sudden. So he buys businesses on sale. Once he does that and manages them really well, this is what happens. He just gets buckets of cash. They just come rolling in the door, they make a bunch of money. So this is us, Stewardship Properties. What do? Well, we go out in the marketplace, we find 123 Main Street. We find it undervalued. Andrew looks through a lot of acquisitions, makes a lot of offers. He finds this house, it's undervalued. We purchase it. Then we go to the next house. We buy Grand Street. We buy Walnut Street. We buy Cedar Street. We keep buying these little houses. We think of them as little businesses out there that we're buying below what the market value is if they're managed well. They're on sale. We're buying these assets on sale. Buy another one. We keep buying them. We keep going. We get more and more houses that are on sale. We don't have to buy all of them, but we buy the good ones that we can find that we really like. That top one, the fourplex, we buy all sorts of different stuff. These are all houses that we've purchased in Kansas City. So again, we're buying them on sale, but the value of these houses is not their price tag, it's how well we can manage them. That is what their value is. If we manage them well and they make a lot of money, they're going to be worth a lot of money. If we manage them poorly, like people running a corporation really bad, and it starts losing money or doesn't make much of a profit, the value of those assets is not worth as much. So once we have all these houses and assets and things, this is what we do, or what we want to do. We're going to get big piles of money as well. So that's what our whole plan is here. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is, I talked about this briefly in our last talk. Who was there, just so I have a reference that heard me and Andrew talk last time? So not all of you, but quite a few of you. So you managing it or having a manager manage it? This is a very important question. I'm going to come at this talk mostly from the point of view of me managing it, or us, our company managing it, building a management company. But most of this still applies to having an outsourced management company do it. There are a lot of reasons to do that, a lot of advantages to it. Sometimes they'll do much better than you will, but not always. One of the things I will say, just be very careful if you use a manager. You really have to know all of this stuff, even if you use a property manager. The main reason for that is you need to protect yourself and need to know that they know what they're doing. Where we're from, Eugene, Oregon, this actually just happened in between our two talks. The largest property management company in Eugene just basically went out of business, went into receivership because there was a bunch of fraud going on. It basically turned into a pyramid scheme. 3,500 units of campus rentals and things like that. And all those owners' deposits, all those tenant accounts, it's all gone. All that money. There's $9,000 for 3,500 units in the bank account right now. A lot of people lost a lot of money because they weren't watching their assets being managed by someone else. That's a really sad story, and it's a true story, and it happened a week ago or something like that. This can happen. It's scary. I don't want to say property managers are bad. A lot of times they're the best option, but you have to know this stuff anyways, because you have to know that your manager is doing the right things and taking care of your investments. So it's always the first and last question of property management is whether you're going to do it or someone else is going to do it. First question, because when you first have a house, you need to have a plan for it. The last question, because you're always asking yourself that, how is my management doing? What do I need to do differently? And if you get big enough, you have to outsource it on some level, even if that's just building a company yourself, so you don't have to do every aspect of it. But you need to know how all the aspects work to make sure it's all being done correctly. So next, other thing I'll talk about, I want to make sure I'm comparing apples to oranges here, because there's two very different types of property management in my mind. There's on-site property management, which is like an apartment complex, and then there's off-site property management, which is like houses and duplexes, and kind of scattered around. We have a central office on Truce that Andrew alluded to earlier. We have a lot of houses around the city. We manage that all from that office. So, you know, most things are 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes away from our office. That's a lot different than having an apartment community of like 50 units all at once, or 100 units or 200 units that you're all managing from the same place. There's a lot of different challenges with either one of them that you have to do differently. I honestly believe off-site property management has more difficulties to it, but they are different difficulties. I'm going to be, again, talking mostly about off-site management because that's what I've done, that's what I know better, but they really do bleed into each other. So I'll explain that a little bit. Again, on-site management is different than off-site management. Just know that going in. You gotta know which one you're doing, you gotta know how to do it. So next, before you ever collect a rent check, you can't just buy a property off of pro forma, or as Andrew likes to call them, pro facas, and just expect that money's gonna come in. You've gotta do stuff to acquire that money. First thing you gotta do before you rent, you gotta know how much you're gonna charge for it. You gotta know how much that property's gonna rent for. You gotta pick a rent price. You can't just say, hey, I wanna rent my property, just give me money every time. You gotta actually have a price set out there. So how do you figure that out? What's the best way? Well, this may not be very, amazing to tell you guys, but the best way is just experience. That's the best way to know what a property's gonna rent for. One of the reasons I feel like I know markets is because I've been doing it so well. I know what the rents are in Grandview. I know that if I have the same house on the west side of Grandview and the east side of Grandview, they're renting for different prices or at different speeds. Lee Summit is a lot different than Grandview. Lee Summit, I feel like I can rent anything there really quickly, no matter what price I seem to put on it. Raytown, things sit for a lot longer. I know all this stuff because I've been doing it. So that might be discouraging to someone who doesn't have a lot of experience. Well, you need to learn that experience, you need to grow it, and that's a good advantage of being in your property management company. The other thing you can do is you can borrow experience from someone. Ask someone who actually knows the marketplaces, and that way you can really understand what you can rent this property for by borrowing the experience of someone else. Other tools I really like is online stuff. So I'm going to go over different ways to advertise, and I'm going to tell you to advertise on Craigslist and rent links and stuff. And you want to know what your competition is when you're renting a property. So a good way to see what a property is going to rent for is what is the other properties in the neighborhood renting for. Go onto Craigslist, use their map feature. I use a website called HotPads. There's a lot of websites very similar to it. It basically pulls information from other sites and it gives you a lot of rentals. I use these two sites and I look at them and I say, okay, I have this house on 123 Main Street, and I see that 124 Main Street is renting for this amount of money, and it's a very similar house. It gives me an idea. I look at the block. It's kind of like when Andrew comps a property. I do the same thing for how much a property is going to rent for. Now, in addition to that, a lot of people, what they like to do is they like to drive around the neighborhood and call on for rent signs and stuff. I don't personally recommend that strategy. The biggest reason I don't is because it feels a little bit dishonest to me. I like to be honest in what I do, and if you're calling people saying, hey, how much is it going to rent for, and you're not really interested in that, you're just trying to get information from them, I don't particularly like doing that. A lot of people do it, it's been effective, I've done it before. Also, you don't really know everything. All you know is the statistics. You don't know what the condition of the property is, you don't know the details of everything, you're just going off of kind of what they're saying about it. But then the last thing that I would say when picking a price is details really do matter. A 3-2 in Raytown, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Raytown will not rent the same as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Raytown. The reason is because they're different houses. One of them might have 3 bedrooms on one side of the house and a bathroom, and then a master bedroom with another bathroom and a kitchen. It was all normal. The other one might have, well, the 3 bedrooms over here and then the kitchen, and then the 2 bedrooms are upstairs and it's just all funky and you don't have everything in the right place. Yeah, you can still rent that house, but the demand's going to be less, so your price has to be less. So you've got to take those details into account. Another detail is how the house looks. When you walk into it, is it clean or is everything fixed? You can rent houses that are not completely fixed up, but you can rent them for more if they present really well. In addition to that, just your company, your brand, how well are you doing? How many people do you have calling you? Those things change what you can rent a property for. Once you have a rental price, you have to do more before you can just slap it on the market and get it rented. You got to make sure you fix everything up. You got to make sure all the details are taken care of. Andrew is very good with his scope of work, but you miss stuff. You don't get everything done. You got to go through it again and make sure all those little things are checked off, because things don't look good when they're not fixed and correct. Now, how do you do this? Well, it's very similar to the rehab thing that Andrew does, but it's called a systems check. And Andrew has some, he's going to pass those around. And what is a systems check? Well, I'll show it up here as well. This is a systems check right here. Very detailed, every room in the house. You go and you check off what's good, what's not, what you have to fix, what's okay. And you got to make sure all these things are in order. I mean, I go so far as if there's a ceiling fan in the living room and 2 light bulbs are on and one of them's missing, I either replace it, or if I can't replace it for some reason, I make sure I mark one of the light bulbs is out. Make sure all the outlet covers look good. You know, make sure There's no stains on the carpet. Make sure you have all the door stops in, because that's the thing that's easy to miss. You got to do all these checks, because when someone walks into a property and they see, oh, that light's out, and oh, they're missing a piece of baseboard over there, and the laundry room was all kind of nasty and stuff like that. It builds a sense of mistrust, and it's like, if they're not taking care of the property before I rent it, are they really going to take care of the property after I rent it? And that is what people are really thinking when they're trying to rent from you. So make sure you go through all the stuff. This is very detailed. It goes exterior, paint, siding, roof, fence, chimney, gutters. You get all that stuff. You go garage, kitchen. It keeps going. General interior. You figure out if the heating works, if the cold air works. Now, obviously, you can't figure out if the AC works when it's negative 10 degrees outside, but you do everything you can. You check the living room, go into the basement, the bathroom. It keeps going. I filled out a lot of these, and they take up a lot of my time. Bedroom number 1, bedroom number 2, bathroom number 2. You keep going. Bedroom number 3, bedroom number 4, bathroom number 3. And then laundry room, other rooms, maybe a dining room or a basement living room of some kind. You just got to get this all figured out. You've got to have all your ducks in a row before you rent the property. You can show it before all this stuff is completed. You don't have to have every doorstop in there before the house is completed, but you want to constantly be working on that, and you need all of this done before somebody moves in, or you're going to hurt yourself. So back to things you need to do before you rent. There's one other really important thing to know about before you're renting a property. That's time. Time is always against you when you're trying to rent a property. You always have to be aware of it. Every day you are not renting that property is costing you money. If you have a $1,000 rental, that's $33 every single day that you're missing out on. Just think of somebody taking $33 out of your wallet every single day. That really adds up fast, and it's a huge expense on the potential of your investment. If you don't have any vacancy, obviously, you're going to make more money. It's going to be managed better. Your property and your asset is going to be worth more money to you and to anybody you want to sell it to. Remember, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So you've got to prepare your rentals correctly. You've got to have a correct rent price. You've got to fix up everything. And you've got to do it in a timely manner and make sure you're aware of how long it's taking. So the next thing to do is advertising. Now, what's the most common type of advertising? What's kind of advertising that's the most common that you would see? Craigslist is very common.
Post-lets is good.
What about a sign in the yard?
Yeah.
Yep. That's everybody. A lot of people tell me, I don't want to buy a property unless I know I can rent it with just a sign in the yard. Because it's that nice of a property, it's going to rent itself. I say never have that philosophy. Never have that philosophy. It is going to cost you money. Now, we also recommend Craigslist and rent links, which I'll get into in a second. But the reason why you need to do more than just a sign in the yard is because if that's a sign in the yard, maybe you get someone to call you and they're a good prospect and they rent it for the price you want. Well, that's great. But what if you had 10 people calling you for that? Well, you don't need 10 people to call you to rent your house. You need one person who's going to rent that house. So you have the same amount of supply. Your product is the same. You have one house. You can only rent one house. But if you have 10 people all wanting that same house, your demand has just gone up. This is economics 101. What happens when the demand goes up and the supply stays the same? Price goes up. So maybe that $1,000 rental, now because you have a lot of people wanting it, it's $1,100 all of a sudden. So that's a 10% increase in rent. That's really nice. It's much more than a 10% increase in return. Because remember, that $1,000 is paying all your expenses. That extra $100, there's no expenses on that. That's all profit. That's managing it really well. That just totally changes your return when you can do something like that, when you can increase your rents by that much.
So if you list a property for $1,000 and then you get a bunch of responses to it, you then go.
No, we don't change the rent price on people. We don't do that. You can whenever you want, unless a lease is signed, but we don't do that. What we do is we know we have really good advertising and we're going to generate a lot of leads because we have good advertising out there. And because that we know the demand for a property is going to be higher than the person who only has a sign in the yard, meaning we can stamp a higher price on it. So that's how we do that. So I'm just going to say, you need more than a sign in your yard to bring your property for top dollar. If you only have a sign, if you're limited on marketing, you're not going to be able to get your maximized profit. You're not going to manage the company or the house as well. And overall, it's going to be less return and less profitable and not worth as much. So another way to do advertising is branding. Now, what is branding? Well, we have a brand. Our brand is 333 Rent. You ever see that? It's a phone number. You can call it right now. You'll get our voicemail. And it's an easy thing to remember. You know, our residents know it. You know, it's easy to put on a sign and have people call it. It makes sense. Coca-Cola is a brand. They do lots of advertising, so everybody knows Coca-Cola. Geico is a brand now because of their Gecko and stuff like that. Building a brand is a great way to grow a business. But you might be thinking, well, you know, someone's moving from Iowa. They're going to have no idea who 333 Rent is. That's not going to help me at all. Building that brand it's worthless to me. You know, our reach in Kansas City of people who know 333 Rent is, I'm sure, less than 1% of people in Kansas City. So we don't have thousands of dollars or millions of dollars in marketing to get the brand out there. So what is the value of it? The value of it is your current customers. They know your brand. They've experienced your brand. They have feelings about your brand. And you know what? They have friends. They have family. They have people who are looking for rental properties too. If you build a strong brand with your customers, you can get word of mouth advertising just for free. If you have a strong rental company that people like, that people know, can remember, they're going to keep coming to you because they're going to tell their friends about it. It's easy to know, oh, I'm looking for a place. Well, I like the place I'm renting, see if they have anything more. Make sure your residents know you have other places for rent. Give them an incentive. We give people a card whenever they move in saying, hey, resident referral. If you refer someone to us, you get $150 off your rent, and they get $50 off their deposit when they put down a deposit with us. So you can build your brand still, but do it with your current customers, because those are the people who have experience with your brand. They've touched it before. So your best source of hot leads are your current tenants. You can get cold leads all day from Craigslist, from RentLinks, from all those other sources, but your best leads are from your current tenants. I skipped RentLinks for a second. I'll explain that. Craigslist is something, I'm going to go back really quick to that so you can see it. But so Craigslist and RentLinks, I skipped this really quick. So Craigslist, do Craigslist, get your advertising on there. A lot of people don't like leads from Craigslist because they think there's a lot of kind of, you know, not great people on there. But it's still advertising. You can screen those people out, and there's a lot of people who use it. You're going to get a lot of leads from Craigslist. What RentLinks is, it's pretty much the exact same thing as PostList, if you've ever heard of that. We use it because we think it's a lot easier to use and we like it more. It basically, you post it on RentLinks, and then it goes out to like Trulia and HotPads, like I mentioned before, and other websites, and it gives you a bunch of different advertising across a lot of platforms, and it's pretty easy. If you're going to pick one of these three things, I think RentLinks is the best one to do, and it's going to give you the most leads coming in. But like I said before, those are all cold leads. The only way to get hot leads that actually trust your company already and want to rent from you is from your current customers. So what is the best advertising you can put out there? There's one form of advertising I have not mentioned at all that is the absolute, my favorite advertising in the world. No vacancy, not for rent. Why is that? Because it's already rented and paying me money. That's the best way to do it. If you can keep tenants, the best advertising is to keep your units full, because turnover is a huge expense. What is turnover? This is turnover. It's burning up the cash in your pocket. It's just an expense you don't want to have. So what are the best strategies what are the costs of turnover? The first one is vacancy. Again, like I said, every day a $1,000 rental is not rented. It's $33 out of your pocket. If someone's moving out, there's got to be at least some time that they have to move in. Think about all the things you have to do when you have to re-rent the property. You got to move the person out first of all. You got to make sure they get out on that date. You got to go there. You got to do a systems check and make sure all those things get fixed. You got to get the cleaners in there. Then you got to get the advertising up. You got to get the sign out in the yard. You've got to, get the person to call you. They got to go see the property. They have to apply to the property. You have to process that application. They got to put down the deposit. They got to sign the lease, and that's all going to take time. Every single time you have a vacancy, and that's going to cost you money. On top of that, there's repairs that need to be made. Now, the deposit that you get is supposed to cover those repairs. Who has ever had a deposit not cover the repairs? Probably a lot of people in here. I've had, repairs go to thousands and thousands of dollars, and yeah, you can charge that to the tenant, but you're going to get pennies on that dollar if you ever get anything from it. So make sure that you don't have a lot of turnover, because you have to keep repairing it every time someone moves out of it. On top of that, there's cleaning expenses. Yeah, again, that's supposed to be covered by the deposit, but if all your deposit's taken up by your repairs, you're still going to have to do the cleaning on top of that. And then The deposit doesn't cover wear and tear either. You know, if the carpet is 10 years old and now you have to replace the carpet because they moved out, you can't charge someone for that. So you're gonna have general just expenses of people moving out and having to fix general wear and tear stuff as well. Last one is just your time and energy. Those things are valuable. Protect those things. You can't find the next good purchase if you're busy trying to re-rent a property you already rented. You know, you can't fix up anything if you're trying to advertise it or do a showing and stuff like that. It takes up your time and energy every time you have vacancy. If you have less vacancies, you can focus your energy on those ones. So every time you have to have a vacancy, it's going to take up your time and energy, and you want to prevent that as much as possible. So how do you do that? Well, I'll say turnover will be your biggest expense in property management, period. It'll always cost you more than any other thing. So if you have big turnover costs, you've got to fix that. That will ruin your business by not getting paid on it. So that will be your biggest expense.
Do you have an estimate or a range of how much it typically costs you every time you have a turnover?
I'll put it this way, $0 to like $10,000. That's the range. It totally depends on the tenant and how they treat the property. There are so many variables in that, I hesitate to even really give any sort of range. It's so dependent on who you put in there, how they treated the property, how you did everything, just who that individual. There really is no way to gauge it. Typically, if you're doing things right, the deposit will cover everything except general wear and tear. But you know, that one person who cost you $10,000 on a $50,000 house just totally ruined, you know, 4 years of income on the house.
Three
So,
times rent.
yeah.
1 month, 3 times.
I have a question. We're really new in this, and we found that we end up having to, if they sign the year lease, it's a good lease, and then at the end of the lease, they're really ready to go.
Mhm.
Is there something about when you're selecting tenants and finding the right tenants that are going to stay there long term?
There are some things you can do to do that. We don't do a ton of that. Usually the way to do that is to target market your tenants in terms of the types of people, the types of locations, and things like that. One trick, I've heard Jeffrey Taylor's talked about this, when they have an application, he puts on the application, how long are you intending to live at this property? And there's no option for 1 year. There's 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. And so it's kind of like the anchoring thing. They have to circle one of them, so they circle 3 years. And so it kind of anchors in their mind they're going to stay there long. There's some tricks and stuff like that, but generally it's just depending on the people that you get moving and how long they're going to stay there. So, but how do you prevent those expenses, the vacancy and all those other things? It's resident retention. And what is resident retention? It's that people are happy. People don't want to move. Moving sucks. Who's enjoyed moving? It's a lot of work. It really is. So keep people happy. And what are the best strategies to do that? First one is pretty simple, except it's very difficult to do. Customer service. There's so much money to be made in business with customer service. You've got to get this part right. Now, what does that mean? That means, oh, I'll do anything for you at any time. No. It means doing things professionally, treating people well, having a smile on your face, being personable, going out of your way when it makes sense. It's making sure they feel like you care about them. They're not just a tenant living in a property paying you rent. They're a person who has their own problems, own issues, and you need to know that, and you need to be considerate of that. Treat them well, treat them with respect. They're not a number to you, they're an actual person. So remember that when you're dealing with them, and they will reward you by wanting to stay at your property. People sometimes have to move, that happens. They get a job somewhere else, they want to go buy a house. No one's going to stay there forever. But again, if you have good customer service and they're happy, they don't want to have to deal with another rental company. If they're happy with you, there's no reason to move. So give them good customer service and they'll stick around. Another thing that people do, we don't do this in our company, but I've heard a lot about it, is renewal gifts. Now, I've often heard the cost of a new customer in business is 10 times the cost of retaining an old customer. In property management, it might be 100 times. To get a new customer, it costs 100 times more than keeping the old one. So what's the cost of giving them a little gift when they renew their lease? Jeffrey Taylor, what he does is he makes it a big event, like it calls it their anniversary of living at the property. So for their anniversary, what he does is, he says, well, you can get a new ceiling fan in your house, or you can get your carpet cleaned, or we can repaint the property, and he gives them these choices of things that they can do. So if they re-sign the lease, then they're going to go do this thing, and it makes them like, well, I'm excited to get a new year lease. I'm excited when that happens. I'm happy to stay with you because you've had good customer service, and now why would I want to leave when I'm getting a new paint job on my house and it keeps your house up? You're going to have to paint it at some point anyways. So it's reinvesting into your asset. It's making people happy, like you care about them and treating them well and keeping them a nice house to live in. Another thing is community. This isn't as important for single-family houses, but for apartment complexes and communities, it's super important. It comes down to a duplex when this comes important, because people care about their neighbors and who's living next to them. If you have a fourplex and you have someone who's just terrible to live next to, well, they're not going to want to keep living there. Who wants to live next to that person who's banging music at 3 in the morning? No one's going to want to do that. So what you got to do is have a good community and focus on having quality people in your properties that are going to treat them right and treat their neighbors correctly. Last one is just be nice. Just be someone who they want to be around. Be a company they want to deal with. If they don't want to deal with you, they won't deal with you, because, like I said, nobody wants to move. They only move if they have to or if you give them a reason to. So don't give them a reason to. Make them like your company, make them want to keep renting from you. The best resident retention there is maintenance. That is by far the absolute best resident retention you can have. The number one reason someone's going to move from your property, other than a job out of state or some other reason they really need to move, or they're buying a house or something like that, the number one reason people move is because they're dissatisfied with maintenance. I get so many people who are calling me moving out of their place because they won't fix the dishwasher and I'm just tired of calling them about it. Or I don't have heat in my house, so I can't live here anymore. So maintenance is the thing to do. Now, how do you do good maintenance? Well, who is this? Usain Bolt. What is he really good at?
Running.
How does he run slow or
Fast.
Runs very fast? Fastest man in the world. Be the fastest at maintenance you can be. If someone has, an outlet that's out, well, it might not be that important. And you have, sewage backing up in another person's house, that's a lot more important, obviously. But the person who has the outlet out, they don't care about the person who has the sewage backing up. It doesn't bother them at all. People are completely self-absorbed with their situation. They don't want to hear any excuses of why you're not getting it done. They just want to get it done. Now, obviously, you're not going to run out at midnight to fix an outlet that's out. But make sure you deal with all maintenance orders promptly, because, again, no excuse in the world will explain to someone why you didn't come there quickly. The other way to do maintenance really well, quality and professionalism. Do it right the first time. Don't go back there a second time. This is very critical. If there's a $5 fix that you can do for something or a $50 fix, choose the $50 fix. You're going to own this thing for a long time if you're truly doing the buy and hold model. So if you're going to do the buy and hold model, fix it right the first time, because you're going to be the ones fixing it the second time. So fix it right. Don't put in something that's going to break again. On top of that, always do it professionally. We don't call our maintenance people maintenance guys in our company. It's just some guy coming over to their house, a stranger, they don't know who this person is, it's not very good. This is a small difference, but we call them maintenance professionals. Now, why do we do that? Because it gives the person credibility. This isn't some stranger coming over to the house to fix your leaky pipe. It's someone who's a professional, who knows what they're doing, and they're gonna get it right, they're gonna treat you with respect. And that's very important. Whoever is doing the maintenance for you, make sure they do those things and check up on that. Make sure people are happy with the maintenance professionals you have working for you. Because if they aren't, you need to find someone else who's going to represent your brand and your company well and make the people happy and want to keep living there. Remember, they don't want to move, but if they don't trust you, they will. So make sure they trust you. And maintenance, also, think about it. If you have a good resident, how often do they call you? Almost never. They call you when there's a maintenance problem. Throughout the entirety of the lease, 90% of their issues with you are going to be related to maintenance. That's going to be the times they actually interact with you. Their entire feeling about your company is going to be based on how well you dealt with those maintenance issues. Because if they're not late on the rent, you're never going to call them. So that's their entire perception of your company, is based on how well you take care of that maintenance order. So there's some other things to know about maintenance, but also quality and quick maintenance is your best resident retention. You don't want to move, so just remember that. Some other things to know about maintenance. Expect it. It happens. It's part of property management. A lot of people never get into property management because they don't want to deal with the leaky toilet that's going to come at 12 in the morning. A lot of people can't handle property management. Every time the phone rings with the maintenance order, they get emotionally angry about it. They're frustrated. They're tired of things breaking. They don't want people bothering them anymore. It's too much. Who's had that feeling before? It's just you don't want to take that next call. It's just a pain. How do you deal with that? You have to expect it. know that that maintenance call is coming tomorrow. Have a plan for it. Expect it to happen. Know who's going to go out there if it's going to happen. Know who to call. That call's coming. It just hasn't come yet. You can predict the future with maintenance. It's always there. If you expect it, you won't get angry about it. You won't get frustrated. You won't get tired. And if you're not frustrated and tired, you'll be nice, and your residents will like working with you, and they'll enjoy the experience and want to keep renting from you. But if you're tired and frustrated, it's all going to break down because you didn't expect it coming. If you know it's coming and you're prepared for it, you'll deal with it much better. Also, don't be a doormat. That outlet that's out, don't go out and fix that midnight just because they're yelling at you. You have to be strict with people about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. So, a funny story out in Lee Summit, we had a really nice house. We completely fixed it up. We did a good scope on it. It was all ready to go, and the person moved into it. We completely redid one of the bathrooms. And a couple months after the person moved in, they say, you know what, my toilet doesn't work. And we're like, that's kind of strange. I would think a brand new toilet would keep working, but we'll go out there and figure it out. Our maintenance professional goes out there and looks at the toilet and says, well, it works. The water's flushing, see? And she says, no, the water's not flushing from the back. It's flushing around the whole bowl. Yeah, it's flushing the water. It's like, no, but it has to flush from the back. Those are the toilets I like. It's like, no. So, and she said, I'm not okay with this toilet. I need a toilet. And we just said, no. You're not getting a new toilet when it's perfectly fine. You can't just go to the whims of everything someone wants. If you do that, they're going to expect more the next time. We've also had people call us in the middle of the night saying, hey, my dishwasher is leaking water all over the place. We need to get someone out here to fix it. Our guy goes out there, he looks at the dishwasher, there's water in the dishwasher, but it's just sitting there and it's just not working. Well, yeah, they just wanted their dishwasher fixed so they could do the dishes for the morning. Like, we're not here to serve every little issue that you have. We'll go fix the dishwasher, but we're going to do it at an appropriate time to do so. So we put in our lease, if we have to go out there for an unnecessary reason and you force us to do that because you're complaining or lying to us about it, we charge your account $100 because we're not going to bend to any will that you have. We're going to take care of any major problem that you have. We're going to fix everything well, do it professionally and do it quickly, but we're not just going to do whatever you want. We're not going to build you a new house just because you want a new house. That's going to get really expensive for us. Another thing is be true to your word. Residents will remember every little thing that you say and they will embellish it and stick you to it. If you say, you know what, I'm going to be there in 2 days and you're there in 3, they're going to be pretty mad at you. So if you've got to say something, stick to it. Also, don't bind yourself to something. Say, we'll get there as soon as we can. Don't say, I'll be there by the end of the week, because you don't know what's going to happen. If you say by the end of the week, they're going to say you're supposed to be there last week. So say what you're actually going to be able to accomplish. Do not embellish it. Do not say, oh, they're really mad at me. I'm going to make it easy by saying, I know someone's going to be there tomorrow. Don't promise them that, because they will hold you to that. You have to be strong-willed in that sense to not bend to just their emotions. You have to be able to say what's true and then deal with it and follow through. The last thing is sell a quality product. Now, one of the reasons we don't manage in some of the lower end areas of town is because we don't skimp on our maintenance and rehabs. We do them nice and we do them professionally, we do them well. We give people a nice product. You can give people a nice product in the lower end areas of town and you'll find really good people who will rent it and pay you rent on time. That is possible. But it is also much more difficult, and the costs, like Andrew always said, are the same in the middle of Kansas City as they are in Overland Park to fix a broken toilet or something like that. The costs are the same. So we want to be able to provide a quality product, so we budget that into our maintenance costs, and we expect it, and so we make sure we can provide that quality product. We're going to do that nice fix. We're going to make sure that things are up to date and working correctly. We're not going to just jimmy rig something so that it technically has worked and they can't sue us for it. Doing maintenance well and correctly the first time will save you money. You have to send someone out there twice, that's pretty much all it's going to cost that the materials of most of your maintenance jobs are going to be. So send someone out there once and get it done right as long as you can. So sometimes you still have vacancies even if you work hard on resident retention, you have good maintenance. People often, they'll move out for different reasons. You're going to have to get prospects. So how do you get prospects? Well, they're typically going to come through a phone call or an email. That's 90%, 95% of the prospects we get. Sometimes, we have an office. Sometimes people will stroll into our office. but almost all the time it's your phone call or an email that is our first contact with them. So how do you deal with this? Well, you need to qualify the prospect because you need to protect your time and you need to value their time. What do I mean by that? If someone calls you or emails you about a property, make sure it fits all their needs. Make sure they know the rent price. Make sure they know the bedrooms and bathrooms. Make sure they know where it is. You don't want to go show someone a house and then tell them it rents for $1,000 and say, oh, I thought it was $800, and then you just wasted a bunch of time of theirs and yours. Make sure they know your policies. If you don't allow pets, well, even if you do allow pets, you should ask them, do you have pets? And if they say yes and you don't allow them, say, well, I'm sorry, this house isn't going to work for you. It makes no sense to wait till you get to the application and see it and then go, oh, now I can't approve them. You want to get that done up front, almost just for their sake. You don't want to waste their time. They're trying to find a property. You don't want to waste their time. You want to be courteous to them. And then you don't want to go out and show someone a property or pay someone to go show a property when it's not worth your time or your employees' time. You want to make sure that other ways to make sure prospects are going to fit your house is go over a lot of your qualifications with them. If you do not allow evictions, straight up ask them, do you have any evictions on your background report? Because we will not allow those in our properties. Be nice about it. Don't assume anything. But you want to ask them, if they're not going to qualify, why should they pay you an application fee just to find that out? Say, I'm sorry, but if we get an eviction on your background report, it's going to automatically come back denied. I don't think it's worth your time or your money to apply with us. Big caveat here. Do not say don't apply or you cannot apply. That would be considered illegal under fair housing. Never tell someone they cannot apply. They can always apply. Just tell them it's probably not worth it. I would recommend against it. So let them apply if they really want to, but tell them I don't think it's worth your time and effort. And almost every single time they'll say, yeah, I don't want to apply to someone who I know is going to reject me. Ask them about their criminal background, what kind of criminal, and kind of get a sense of where they're at. Look at when they're moving in. If they're trying to move in 6 months from now, there's no reason to show it to them that day. Say, call me back because the property's probably going to be rented by then. So these are all things that people miscommunicate and you end up wasting a bunch of time. It's really important to protect that because, again, if you just have one vacancy, you probably have another job you're at and you probably have other things you want to do or you need to go find more houses to buy. So you got to spend your time doing that. If you have 10 vacancies, 15 vacancies, you want to spend your time dealing with the other ones that you can actually rent instead of this one. So make sure you're using your time wisely. So what do you do when they do want to see your property and they are qualified and they do make sense? Well, you got to schedule the showing. And again, this is more for off-site property management. On-site property management is a little easier because they come to the office and then you can just walk them to the unit and go show it. With off-site property management, you have to drive out there. Sometimes from our office, it's a 30-minute drive there and a 30-minute drive back. So we don't always have someone available to do that. So we have to schedule out. Same-day showings are the best because they're ready, they're intrigued, they're excited about it. So you want to do that, but it's not always possible. So you do sometimes have to schedule it out. If you schedule it out, 2 days later, and you see it on the calendar, you go out to that property at that time, you made a mistake. What do you need to do before? You need to call them before the showing. We make confirmation calls an hour before the showing. If you just go out there and look at the property all of a sudden, they're probably going to be there about 10% of the time if it was scheduled 24 hours before that. You always have to make that confirmation call because you're going to go to a vacant property where no one's going to meet you most of the time. Call them beforehand, make sure you got their information, call them, say, I'm Phillip from 333 Rent, I'm just making sure that we have a scheduled showing for you. Are you planning on making that? They say yes. Okay, do you know where it is? This is the person who's going to be meeting you. This is the car they're going to be driving. Do you have any questions? Okay, we'll see you at the property at this time. Make sure you do that. It works really professionally. Doctors' offices do it because they need to know who's going to be there. You got to confirm the showing before you go there. Don't waste your time or the prospect's time if you know it's not a fit. That's really important because you can waste a lot of time on people who just are never going to rent your properties. You got to focus on the people who are actually prospects for your residents. Again, Craigslist has a lot of people who are going to call you. A lot of those people aren't people you want to rent to. So you have to be able to screen them out and do it through the phone. One other thing is, don't try to do all the qualifying on the phone. You're not going to actually know what's going to come back on the background report. Never promise that they will be approved. Never promise that they're going to be rejected. But get a general sense and then let them know why this is probably not going to work out. You never want to bind yourself to tell someone, yeah, you're definitely going to get approved, and then you realize there's something on the background board that didn't quite match, and then you have to reject them. Or a lot of people don't know if they have eviction. It's like, I don't know if there's an eviction on my background. I had the situation where I got kicked out or I got a 30-day notice. So wait till you actually get the background report to make that judgment call of what actually happened. So once you have a prospect and you do showing, or you actually have to do the showing. So what's important with the showing? You got to keep the property clean. It's very important to have a clean property with all the details taken care of. I alluded to this earlier, but a clean property will rent more than a dirty property will. Again, what they are looking for, they want to trust you. That's the trust law right there. They are trusting you with the next year that you're going to take care of them if they have a problem. And if they see a light missing and there's no dryer vent and you don't know, how old the appliances are, they're not going to trust you. And it's like, if I can't trust you in the limited interactions we've had and the few things I can see, I got to make a big judgment call for the next 12 months. I want to make sure I'm making the right judgment call on that because I really have to trust you. So you need to build that trust with them. How do you do that? Customer service. You be professional with them. You be nice to them. You talk about them. You be personable with them. If you're not good at that stuff, I would just quickly recommend a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Who's read that book, heard of that book? That book I will recommend that book every day of my life to every person. That book has totally transformed what I've been able to accomplish in all aspects of my life. Follow that book. That book is a guideline and a rule book for how to deal with other people and how to make them basically trust you and do the things that you want them to do. Remember, you're selling something for thousands of dollars. If you have a $500 lease you're trying to give somebody, that's $6,000 over the course of a year. That's the biggest purchase they're going to make that entire year. So they're going to make sure they're making the right decision on it. They really have to trust you because they're not going to buy anything more expensive than that this whole time. And they're basically, they don't know how you're going to treat them 11 months down the road. So they need to know now, and it's a big purchase that they're making. So you're selling something very expensive, and be aware of that. You're not going to go to a car lot and see a car that's all nasty inside or something. Even if it's a used car, it's going to be presentable and really nice. Think about it the same way with a rental house. Acquiring applications. So there is some ways to get more people to apply than just having a nice house. The biggest thing you can do, apply now, right now. Don't wait, don't take it home, don't forget how nice the property was, don't go look at that next property that you're going to get excited about. The euphoria and the high of the quality showing is going to wear off really fast. Make sure that if you're at the showing and they like it, have them fill out the application right then. That's not always possible, but then do a follow-up call the next day. Make sure you're doing that quickly. Try to make sure that they don't have a bunch of time to just sit around and go, yeah, I want that place, but I'm going to go home, I'm going to eat dinner first, and then they eat dinner, and then, I didn't fill it out before dinner, so why should I fill it out now? I wake up the next day, okay, it's not going to happen, So get it, the longer the showing has happened, the less likely they're going to apply. Also get an application fee. It'll make them feel more invested in the property and in the application. We went so overboard with the apply now thing, we did a kind of a marketing plan of basically saying, if you apply at the showing, no application fee. That didn't work at all because we got a lot of people who applied who didn't really care. We got a lot of people who applied who weren't qualified at all. They were just trying to sneak in an application behind our backs. It just did not do anything. They will feel more invested if they actually put money down. They'll have some skin in the game, as a lot of investors like to talk about. So make them invest in it by putting an application fee. Our application fee is actually very small. We have a $25 application fee. Our processing costs are higher than that. Our processing costs, we use AAA screening for our processing. It costs us $35 per person and $45 per married couple. So our application fee doesn't cover that. We consider that a marketing expense right there to get people to apply more, but they do need to put something down. They need to actually care about putting the application and not waste their time and energy and our money. And again, I'm going to reiterate, apply now, not later. Do everything you can to get them to apply now. There's a lot of tricks in the trade that you can do. Never pressure someone into applying if they don't actually want the property. Never say you need to apply now. but coerce them as much as you can and put it into their benefit. Be nice about it.
Influence. Coercion or influence?
Influence them would be a better word.
Encourage them.
Yes, to do it now and not later, because the longer it takes, the less likely they're going to do it. So processing application. Okay, I'm going to stop right here for a second. This is what you need to know, because this will determine your success here in buy and hold real estate. You need to get the right person in the property. What is the first thing to know about processing applications? You need to know about fair housing. It is real. It is something you have to take into consideration whenever you're processing an application. What is fair housing? Fair housing basically means you cannot discriminate against the 7 protected classes. Some of those classes are race, gender, familial status, ethnicity, things of that nature. You cannot discriminate against those. That sounds pretty easy to do, but really you have to be able to prove that you're not discriminating against those people. And the only way you can prove that is by treating everybody the same. If you treat one person different than you treated another person, fair housing can look at that and say, well, you treated this person differently because you were discriminating against this other person. That might not be true at all, and it might not be a protected class that you're discriminating against, but you have to be able to prove that, and the only way to prove that is to have all your documentation there and to be able to treat everybody the same. The other thing to know about processing applications, you guys got a big pen, it's a big application, it's a lot of work. You've got to actually spend time on it and effort on it and know what you're doing. It's not just, it doesn't just happen on its own. We outsource our screening because we want it to be done well by a professional company. We use AAA screening, we've been very happy with them. We pay as much as they let us pay because we know this is going to determine how well we do. So what do you need to do with processing applications? First thing you need to look at is evictions. An eviction on a background report is the biggest red flag you can see, in my personal opinion. Maybe not everybody agrees with me, but I think, I see an eviction on there, that's just a giant red flag right there. I will just not accept an eviction in the last 10 years, period. If you have an eviction last term, you will not be approved into my property. You'll not be renting from us. Beyond that, I might make some exceptions based on the circumstances, but I still really don't want to see it. If I see 2, no, I'm not going to do it. Some people will be in situations where they got an eviction on the record. I know one lady, this was a very unfortunate situation for her, but what happened was she was going to move into a property with her boyfriend. She never ended up moving into that property, but she applied. Her name was written on the lease, but she never signed that lease because she never moved in. But that was the lease the company had on file. And so the boyfriend then stopped paying rent. He got evicted. He went to court. He got it on his record. Well, they made a mistake when they went to court because they sent them just the lease that they had on file. That lease had her name on it. When she never lived at the property, she never signed the lease. She never knew the person was getting evicted, and she got it on her background report. And she's going to come to me, and you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say, I'm very sorry, but the eviction's on your record. I can't do anything about it unless it's not there. The reason I'm going to do that is because we need to protect our company, and we need to treat everybody the same. If she can get that off of her background report, great. But if she's not going to, I'm not going to rent to it, because too many chances she's lying to me, or she's trying to coerce me into renting the property to her when I shouldn't. If evictions in Jackson County are difficult. Who's gone through an eviction here? It takes time, it takes money, it takes energy. There's so many ways for a resident to prevent an eviction. If they're willing to go through that process, I don't really want to deal with them, because it means they probably were difficult to deal with, or they weren't proactive in the situation. Now, dismissed evictions are a little bit different. Sometimes I will be okay with a dismissed eviction, but I still don't want to see it. I consider that a yellow flag. A bunch of dismissed evictions meant they kept getting close and somehow were able to figure it out. I don't like that either. A lot of people say, well, what if they pay off the previous landlord and make it right with them? I say no. No way. Because all I'm doing in that situation is saying, you got to go make it right with the other person, but then if you screw me over, you're not the kind of person who's going to come back to me. And now all I've done is now they have less money to pay me rent. So why would I say, yeah, go pay them off and now rent for me when you're really just the same person, only doing something because I'm telling you to? I have no guarantee the next property manager is going to tell them the same thing to pay me off. So that's no good in my opinion. If they're in eviction, I'm sorry, that's just, it's not okay in my book. Next thing is criminal background. I do the same thing with felonies as I do with evictions, no felonies in the last 10 years. I do make one exception for that. DWIs or DUIs, they are serious offenses. I don't take them lightly, but I don't see that as impeding them from being able to fulfill their lease. So I often will make exceptions for only that type of felony. If they have more than one of those, I often will not accept them, because if they get another one and they go to jail, well, they can't really fulfill a lease if they're in jail very well. So that's the only exception I will typically make with felonies. Over 10 years old, sometimes we can make exceptions for that too, but it's rare. Drug charges, I don't like that. The only drug charge I look at lightly is marijuana. Anything else, no drug charges. I don't want it. Sometimes if it's 20 years old or something like that, we can let it go. But typically, if they have drug charges, it's a no. Burglary, other things like that, those don't look good, especially if you're in an apartment community. You don't want to put someone who's had burglary on their background next to a bunch of people who you care about. So,
Or sex crimes.
yeah, or sex crimes, or one thing that we just do not allow, period, any violent felonies, instant denial, no matter what it is. I don't care. If it's a violent felony, we have maintenance professionals, leasing agents, people in the office they have to deal with. If they have a history of a violent felony, it's just a risk I don't want to take into account. Remember, when you're processing application, it's all odds. The perfect application, the perfect applicant will not perform on every single lease. Maybe they will 95% of the time. But that's pretty good. You're going to get a pretty good return if you get it right 95% of the time. Someone who has a lot of red flags doesn't mean they're not going to do bad on the lease, doesn't mean they're not going to perform on the lease, but maybe you have a 10% chance. So you're not going to perform very well. And it's an odds thing. You want to get the best odds. May the odds forever be in your favor, as they say in the Hunger Games. So this is how you make the odds in your favor.
Do you
Next
keep
thing-
in your office like a written list of, these are what we accept and don't accept, and which ones are negotiable?
We have a basic policy, yes, of both things we do. The one thing I will add to that is you can never have a perfect list that will describe every situation. Because maybe you have 3 roommates who are trying to live in a house together, and one of them has a rental reference, one of them makes a bunch of money, one of them doesn't have a job, one of them, it never matches in this perfect little box. One has a credit score of this, it never matches so well. You can have a list of things that are just going to deny people, and you can have a list of things that if they have so many of these things, they get denied, things like that. But never try to fit everybody into a little box, because it is kind of impossible to do that. You're always going to have an exception to any rule that you make. So that's why it is work. You got to process it, but you need to have those qualifications down, because you have to follow fair housing. You have to give reasons, and you have to give reasons why you deny somebody. And you have to have those reasons match every single time. If someone got approved and then someone got denied, but one person was approved with something on the record that you denied someone else for, that's technically a violation against fair housing. You might not be discriminating against a protected class, but you can't prove that you're not doing that. Now, one more thing about fair housing. I've heard a lot of horror stories of people who are not trying to discriminate get sued for a bunch of money. I've never actually seen any of those horror stories happen before. I think they can be overblown at times. You don't have to be paranoid about it. You just have to be smart and protect yourself and do things the right way. Don't discriminate. If you don't discriminate, I've never seen someone really get hammered hard by fair housing before. It probably has happened, but I've never seen it. So just follow the spirit of fair housing and do things correctly, have records, and I would hope you would be okay. The next thing we look at for processing applications is a rental reference. This one's tricky because some people might have great rental references, but they can't get it to you. Well, that's not a rental reference. I don't care what you say you've done or what you say that your landlord won't give you a reference because they don't want you to move. If you don't have it, you don't have it. Sometimes we get around this with a cosigner. If it's a young person who doesn't have a rental reference, they have a parent. Like this is what we did in Eugene and why we thought our rentals in Kansas City would work so well. Everybody in Eugene had parents who made lots and lots and lots of money. So if the student didn't pay for someone, we could just tell dad, Dr. Dad, hey, your son hasn't paid any money and we're going to sue you if you don't pay, and they have a bunch of money so we can get that money. So you get a cosigner to kind of prevent that issue, but a lot of people don't want cosigners. Occasionally we will also have situations where last month's rent is appropriate. I had one resident recently who moved into a house in Lee Summit, and she had a 760 credit score, nothing on her background. She made like 6 times the monthly rent and income, so she was really well qualified. The one thing is she lived with her fiance who owned a house for a long time. She never owned the house herself, but she had no rental reference because of that, or her rental reference was like 10 years old and she couldn't ever get it to us. So I said, okay, you are so qualified in every other way, you're not going to ask your parents for a cosigner because you're in your mid-30s at this point, so why don't we do first and last month's rent? Now, a lot of people are going to balk at that anyways, but again, if you don't have a rental reference, you don't have a rental reference. You need to have that. We require 1 year at least of quality rental history. I want to do more. I would just restrict everybody who could rent from us if I did that. You have to make some concessions with processing an application, because if you only look for the perfect resident, you're not going to find anybody. Nobody's perfect. So also, in lower end areas, you have to have more concessions with things. But this is going to determine how well your rentals perform, is who you put in there. You can't change people. You can't change their behavior. So you've got to give yourself the best odds, even in the lower end areas. Some of the other things we do. Employment and income. You have to verify it. We require 3 times the monthly rent in income per month. And we have to have that verifiable. If it's under the table, it doesn't count as income. If you refuse to give us pay stubs for some reason, it doesn't count as income. We had one person who was co-signing for somebody else, and they apparently made millions of dollars. Okay, that's great. But he refused to give us any way to prove he's making those millions of dollars. He said, I can't give you my tax returns because my business partners, I don't want to jeopardize their information. Well, I'm not going to just go off of your word here. I don't know that you make millions of dollars. I don't care what kind of car you drive. If you can't prove it to us, it doesn't count. You've got to make sure that's true. The last thing I look at is credit. Credit is a little tricky because a lot of good renters have bad credit scores. This is what I say about credit. It is often a tiebreaker for me. The reason I say that is because, again, there are good people with bad credit scores. What a credit score tells me is how much they care about their credit score. That's all it is. Credit scores are the most ridiculous things in the world. I know people who are multimillionaires who have bad credit scores. I know people who make $10 an hour who have 780s credit scores. So is that really going to determine if they're going to fulfill a lease? No, it determines how much they care about their credit. But if they care about their credit, they're going to care about their background and getting evicted and having a judgment against them. So if they care about that kind of thing, they're going to follow your rules and stick to it. If they don't care about it and you say, well, I'm going to get a judgment against you for your money if you don't pay these late fees, they're going to be like, I don't really care. My credit's bad anyways. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to go to Iowa and you can't find me and then I never have to pay it. Sorry. But if you have someone who has a good credit score, if they care about it, they're going to try to make it right with you. Another thing about this stuff, I often have questions on the application that say, have you ever been evicted? Have you ever had a felony or things like that? I check that against their background report. If they lie, I don't like seeing that. I don't want somebody who's going to lie to me about anything. One caveat with that is sometimes people don't know if they have an eviction on their background report. So they might say they don't, or they do, and it's just because they didn't know about it. But again, if I see they have a felony, and they say I didn't have a felony, well, you're obviously lying about that. So no, it's not going to work out, period. I don't want a liar. That's another thing. Another thing is, if they have a bunch of misdemeanors or something like that, that usually will not deny them. If they have too many, though, it means they don't respect authority and they're not going to follow the law. Yeah, okay, they have public intoxication or something like that, or something other silly that's, misdemeanor. I don't like seeing a lot of those because they don't respect authority. And in this situation, I'm the law. I am the authority. I have the lease. You have to follow the rules of that lease. And so if they're not going to respect the government, so they're not going to respect me. So I want to pay attention to that. Last thing I would say is it's better to have no tenant than a bad tenant. Well, there's fewer things I can say more true than that. A bad tenant will cost you so much headache, money, time, just your life. It'll just suck the life out of you having bad residents. It's better to have nobody in there than somebody. You have to make some concessions. Nobody's perfect. But figure this part of your company out as soon as possible and do it right every time, because this will determine your success. This part will determine your success. Now, once you've processed the application and they have been approved, you have to get the deposit. So what's the thing about a deposit? Well, don't stop renting your property until you have one. That's one thing I will say. If someone's applied for you and it's optimistic, don't tell the next person, sorry, it's already taken, because it's not taken yet. You don't know if they're actually going to take it or not. Keep renting it as if nobody has seen it before. Don't lie to people. Don't tell them, oh, you're definitely going to get it, or you're first in line, or things like that. You don't have to tell people if there's already an application, because if someone really loves the house, in some ways you're doing them a disservice to say, sorry, someone's already going to get this place. The reason you're doing that is if they don't get it, and this is the perfect house for them, you want to make sure they try to get it. Also, if the other person who you're processing currently is lingering with their references, they can't get you their rental reference back or their employment verification, sometimes that can take a long time. And some residents will just move on if it takes too long. So you got to make sure this whole process is quick enough. You got to do it right, but you got to do it quick. But if, if one person's kind of lollygagging about getting their references to AAA for us, and someone else applies and they get it done quickly because they really want the property, well, I'm going to rent it to this person because they applied and they got it. It's not first to apply who gets the property. It's the first to be approved and put down a deposit who gets the property. That way you don't miss out on someone who might want it down the road just because you're waiting on this other person. It also, make it a race. Get your references in. Get this all figured out. Get your deposit into me so that you have this property held. There's only one house in the world like this house. You want it, make sure you get it if you want it.
Well, do you take a deposit with the app then?
No, because they have to be approved. We do not take a deposit until they are approved.
Okay.
I do.
You can do that. Some people do that. We choose not to. I don't think there's a huge disadvantage or anything between the two. The main reason is I don't want to take a deposit with someone who has not been approved and it gets denied, and then I have to give them their money back, and then now I have to start showing it again. So I just do the whole process until that deposit comes in. There's cost and benefit to both. That's just how we've chosen to do it. The next thing though is this is moving. It's hard. It sucks. It's a difficult process for the person who's moving, and realize that. Know that they're having to do a lot of work to move, and try to make it easier on them. It's a difficult process. We have to go through all the steps. So you got to schedule. They have to give a 30-day notice to their previous landlord if they're doing it right and they're the type of person you want. So they got to get the deposit. They got to give 30 notice. They want to know where they're going to move. So one of the things we do when someone puts down a deposit, we hold the house for them. We don't just say, when you put down a deposit, you have to start paying rent. We hold the house for them for a couple of weeks. We currently do 3 weeks. We're probably going to move it down to 2 because 3 is a little bit too long, because you don't get rent for those 3 weeks. Now, if they choose to not sign the lease after they put down a deposit, the deposit is not refundable at that point. So they're tied into leasing the house, but you will not get rent from the time they put down the deposit to when the lease starts. Other things this does, it gives you time to actually schedule time to sign the lease and go over it with them. And that's very important. I'll get to that in a second. It just makes the process easier for them. They're more willing to apply, more willing to put down the deposit, more willing to get the process started if they don't feel like they can only put the deposit down as soon as they're ready to move in. So again, we give them 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we're probably going to move them down to 2, just because you've got to give people some leeway in terms of what they're having to deal with. So that's another thing about getting a deposit. Now, next thing is signing a lease. Signing a lease is a lot like this. It's teaching. It's a classroom. You have to lecture them. You have to tell them what's going on. This is very important too. This will save a lot of headaches down the road. Don't just give them the lease and have them sign it and expect them to have read it. What you need to do is you need to set the expectations. Tell them what is in the lease. Tell them what's going to happen if they don't pay rent. Explain it to them. Tell them that they cannot be loud late at night and that it says it in the lease, and explain the consequences to them. Say, if you smoke in your unit, you're going to get kicked out and you're going to have to pay for all the damages. Don't smoke in the unit. If you haven't told us you have pets and you have pets in there, I don't care if it's your mom's pet, your sister's pet, your baby mama's pet, I don't care. It's your pet because we saw it at your property. This is the consequence of that happening. Make sure they understand that they won't always remember it, but you're giving them the chance to understand these are the rules. If you are not okay with the rules, do not sign the lease. We are making an agreement here that you will pay this rent, you will follow these rules, and that we will provide a property management service to you. If you are not okay with that, do not move in. Just don't. I don't want you to, and you don't want to. So I'm going to expect you to follow these rules, and you need to. Next thing you do is you need to have a bulletproof lease. Now, no lease is completely bulletproof. I constantly have a problem. I look through a lease to point out what they did wrong, and I realize it's not in my lease. Well, then I need to change my lease and make it better. Constantly be making your lease better. Now, there's some stuff you can't put in your lease because it's against the law, but you need to have everything that you legally can put in your lease to protect you and have people expect.
What's against the law?
Well, you can't say you can't get a deposit back, or you can't, I don't know. There's well, I'll get to that in a second. A 30-day notice, how that works. You can't change how that works because that's what Missouri law is.
Does it vary from municipality to municipality?
Yeah, some things are based on city and stuff like that, but a lot of it is just state law, some of it's federal law. Like fair housing is, law you can't break, so there's things like that that you have to follow through. So have a bulletproof lease, make sure you have all your rules in there and let them know the consequences of them. So if there is a problem that arises, you can point back to the lease and say, hey, we explained this to you, it's in the lease, this is what happens. I'll explain why that's important in a second. Also explain the law. So things that aren't in your lease that are the law, you need to let them know about that are going to affect the rental situation you have. One of the most common things I always have to explain to people is how a 30-day notice works in the state of Missouri. How a 30-day notice works in the state of Missouri is it never takes effect until rent is due. So if you give me a 30-day notice on the 15th of the month, it doesn't matter until rent is due, which is the 1st of the month. So it's 30 days from the 1st of the month that the 30 notice actually takes effect. The reason I tell people this and make sure they are aware of it is because if they want to move out after their lease is over, they have to tell me the month before. So it's really a 30-plus day notice because it depends on when they give it to me in the month. So if they want to move out at the end of February, for example, they had to give me their 30-day notice in January. And they can't move out, let's say March 3rd, just because they gave me their 30-day notice on February 3rd. That, according to Missouri law, that's not allowed. They have to pay, they can move out if they want, but they owe rent until the end of that month. That's the Missouri law. It works on our end too. I can't give them a 30-day notice and expect something to change in 30 days. It doesn't start to the 1st. I have to explain this to people. Make sure they know that so that when you tell them, hey, you're not allowed to do this, they're already aware of it. They're not always going to follow the rule, but make sure that they at least heard it.
Well, if somebody moves in mid-month, then you just prorate that month? And
That's, yes, we start the
front
lease
end.
that month, yes, we always prorate. We always have our leases end on the 1st. That's not what you have to do, especially with campus rentals. We always try to stagger them. But in Kansas City, we have our leases always end, I guess, on the 31st, the last day of the month. That's how we always do it. And we just prorate, like if they move in halfway through the month, they pay half a month's rent when they move in. Last thing is emphasize. Emphasize the parts that are really important. We actually have parts in our lease that they have to initial next to that are really important, such as when a late fee is due. It's due on the 5th, or it gets put on their account on the 5th. That means when the clock says 12:01 and that calendar says 5, the late fee has already hit their account, and we're not going to get rid of that. And they have to initial that so that they know they did that. So if they come back to me and say, hey, it was the 4th of July, how did you really expect me to come in here and pay on the 4th of July? It's now the 5th. You were closed yesterday. Well, it says in the lease, you initialed it, late fee is charged. If I waive it for you, I have to waive it for everybody. That's fair housing. That's what you have to do. If you get rid of one late fee, you're supposed to get rid of them all. Most people don't do that, but you're breaking the law in a sense if you're doing that. So make sure that you emphasize the parts that really come back to bite you over and over again. And the last thing is follow through. If you set rules, if you set the expectation, you emphasize it, and you explain the law, follow through on all these things. And every time you give a little in one situation, they're going to expect a little bit more in another situation. So if you don't charge them a late fee that one time, well, maybe the next time you won't do it either. Or because you didn't charge a late fee, now they can kind of smoke inside and it's not really a big deal. And if you gave them a pass on one, well, why can't you give a pass on another? Follow through with the rules. If you have a rule, have it for a reason and know you're going to follow through with it. If you don't want to follow through with it, don't have it as a rule. Don't put it in your lease. So there's a difference between month-to-month and year leases, obviously. I'm going to go over some of the advantages of both of them really quick. First, month-to-month leases. They're less hassle. Why are they less hassle? Well, we have 186 units currently. Not all of them are leased, but let's say 170 are leased. That's 170 lease renewals I have to prepare and do every single year. That's a lot of work. Sending out the notices, verifying what they want to do, having them come in the office and sign the lease. It's a lot of work to get that all put together. And if you have month-to-month leases, they just roll over every single month and you don't have to deal with it. It is an advantage. Another one is they don't have a reason to move. If they don't have to commit to a whole year, they might just stay every month, and that might make people stay longer. Sometimes, if they don't have a reason, they don't have to commit to anything. They're just happy. Remember, nobody wants to move. So if they're happy, they're just going to stay. And they're just going to stay. They're going to stay until you bother them and say, hey, you got to sign a year lease now. They're going to be like, you know what? I've kind of been wanting to buy a house. So now that I have to commit to a whole year, I'm gonna go out and buy the house instead. I'm gonna give my notice.
Why can't you just make the 1-year lease roll over just like the monthly?
Have it roll over from 1 year to another year.
Yes.
That is something you definitely can do. There's some reasons I don't. One of the biggest reasons I don't like doing that is because I feel like, personally, I feel like it's a little unfair to tenants sometimes. If they miss the chance to renew their lease, they're stuck for a whole year, and that can be kind of unfair to them. Also, another reason I do it is because it forces us to raise rents a little. I'll get into that in a second. It's something you can do. I just don't particularly like how it works. And there's one other little twist I put on it at the end that I'll explain too, is why we don't do that. Less troublemakers. You might say, why do you have less troublemakers with a month-to-month lease?
Because they know they can.
Exactly, if they're causing problems. I've never tried to, but I never think it would be easy to evict someone for anything other than not paying their rent. That's a very difficult thing to do, saying, hey, they're causing so many problems, but they're paying rent. I'm going to kick them out of the property through the courts. If they want to stay and they're on a year lease, they get to stay. That's basically what it is. Even if they're causing you headaches, they're complaining all the time, you have to deal with them. But if they're on a month-to-month lease, you just say, you know what, you're calling about this maintenance issue again, and it's not a problem. Why don't you just find another place to move? Here's a 30-day notice. You can get rid of the people who you don't want in your properties if you're on a month-to-month lease. Also, you're not going to necessarily get more money anyways, especially in certain areas of town. You might have a break lease fee with the year lease, but if someone wants to move, they're just going to leave. So you're not going to see that break lease fee at any point. So why try to get that from? Why lock people into that? They're just going to go to Iowa, try to skip trace them and find them so you can get a judgment. How much money are you really ever going to see in that situation? It's just a fact in a lot of
Yours are there.
Exactly. So, year leases, it's easier to raise rents. The reason for that again is you kind of have a good point to do that every year. People kind of spend it. What we do in our lease signings is I tell people, after a year, your rent will probably go up a little bit. Usually I've noticed if you raise it about $10, people never really seem to complain about it because you always say, taxes are going up, insurance is going up, we need to cover those expenses, the owner needs to, so they're just raising the rent by the same amount. Sometimes we raise it by more, but I feel like you can always get away with a little bit, especially if you let them know. They're only going to get mad if it comes as a surprise. So make sure it's not a surprise to them that it's happening. But it gives you a good point to do that every year. If you're on a month-to-month lease and then you all of a sudden say, you know what, it's been a while, here's $10 raise, they're going to get frustrated and mad about that because it was a surprise. You have more certainty. A lot of people do fulfill your leases. Not everybody's just going to get up and run out on you. If they're looking to buy a house, they're going to buy it when their lease is up. So you kind of know when people are going to move out a little bit more. So that's kind of nice. Some people will pay break lease fees. We've had a couple people do that before. So sometimes you do get that extra money for those situations. So sometimes you do have more certainty and it does protect you a little bit. But overall, there's a lot of situations where it won't. This is one we've actually run into just recently. It's easier to finance properties that are on year leases. I didn't know this until a couple months ago. We've been trying to get some refinances on some of our big portfolio properties. The institution we were trying to get a loan from said, we consider month-to-month leases as vacant pretty much because you don't know if the person's going to stay there. I find that absolutely ridiculous. But they have the right to say that if they want. They don't think of it as guaranteed money. They don't think we can necessarily perform with a loan because of that. So they didn't want to finance those properties. It's a reality that I didn't know about until a couple weeks ago, but it is a reality, so you got to keep that in mind. Last year leases are industry standard. It's just kind of normally it's what people expect. It's just a good thing when you're talking, people expect you to do your leases. One other thing I will tell you that I think is really important, don't do month-to-month leases up front. Now, why shouldn't you do them up front? Well, because most people don't. If you're the only one offering month-to-month leases, the people who are looking for a place for 3 months or 6 months, they find you, well, they're going to lease from you, but then they're going to move out again. And what did I say about turnover? It's your biggest expense in property management. So if turnover is your biggest expense, you want to minimize that. And if you're catering to month leases, then a lot of people are going to be moving in and moving out pretty quickly, and you don't want that. You want to have people commit to at least a year. It kind of goes back to your question of how do you commit people longer? That's one way we choose to do it, is not focusing on the people who are going to be there temporarily. Now, when we're renewing leases, go ahead.
Do you get a premium for a month-to-month lease?
That's what I'm going over right now. Good time for your question. So once your lease runs out, what we do is we give them a notice more than 30 days beforehand, usually about 50 days beforehand, and say, hey, your lease is about to expire. Here are your options. You can move out when your lease is over if you want to, but let us know that you're doing that. You can sign a year lease at this new price, $10, $20 higher than what they're currently paying typically. Or you can sign a month-to-month lease, which is, instead of $10, will be $75 higher than what they're typically paying. So if someone knows, like, I want to be here for another 3 months, but I'm not going to be here a whole year, if you commit them to a year lease only, they're just going to move out at that point because they know they can't be there long-term. They can't commit to that whole year. But you don't want to just give that to them for free. You charge a premium for it. Now they don't have to go find a new rental that's got to be month-to-month. They don't have to find a temporary living situation. You get to make a premium while they're there. And some people will just do the month-to-month lease, and then they'll end up living there for like 3 or 4 years just because they want that flexibility whenever they need it. Some people hate committing to it. So that's what we do. We charge a premium for it. We make extra cash flow from it, and it protects us against the less certainty and things like that. So go ahead.
Do you truly charge an extra $75 a month for month to month? Is that your standard amount?
That's standard. Once a lease is up, we say $75 more if you want to go month to month. And I'll say, okay, your lease is going to go up by $30 or something like that. But what he really wants is he only wants the lease to go up $15. So he asks for $30 up front, and then they call him and say, hey, you're raising my rent by $30. What's going on here? He says, well, what can you do? And then he negotiates down to half of it. And so he gets the price he actually wanted. And then some people who can afford more, they're just going to pay the $30. So he gets more than he even wanted. So that can be a really effective strategy. We've tried it before. We had some problems with it. I'm reevaluating it. I'm going to try to implement it again once I've kind of gotten everything settled with it. So that's something I've seen a lot of people, or I've heard about doing. They can be an effective way. Again, it's kind of anchoring the discussion. You anchor it high, and then you let them negotiate it back down. And they feel like you're giving something to them. And so they're like, okay, you're giving me something. I'll appreciate that.
Do you ever give an escape clause for like a job transfer? They've got a year lease and say they've got a job transfer that they didn't know about.
I don't put that in a lease. One of the main reasons I do that is because I make the lease really biased towards us. And just, why give them extra benefit when I don't have to? You know, I want the lease to be in my favor as much as possible, so why put it in their favor? If you don't agree to this, don't sign it. If they are in a situation where like, hey, I'm not going to sign it because there's a 2% chance I might have to transfer jobs and I don't want to be tied into this or pay the fee, add it as an addendum to the lease if you really want to. You can do something like that if you choose, but it's never really, no one's ever asked for it. And a lot of companies, I had a friend who lived in Kansas City, he got transferred up to Milwaukee. He worked for Texas Instruments, they transferred him up there, and Texas Instruments just paid all of his fees and paid his entire lease off. So that apartment community got like 6 months of free lease because they didn't have it in their clause that you could do that. So that could happen sometimes. I just don't put anything favorable unless it's a law or something like that into the lease for them. So any laws I follow, and I often put them in the lease so that I explain them to them, but I don't go out of my way to give them more.
What is your buyout clause?
It's actually a fee. It's not 2 months rent, it's a fee of 2 months. So it equals the same amount, but it's actually a fee that goes on it. It's not just happens to be rent, it's a fee. And a fee for a $300 rental needs to be different than a $1,000 rental. That's why we change it, and to make it simple, we just always double whatever the rent is. Another thing, late fees, we do 10% of the rent for a late fee. The reason for that, again, if it's a $300 rental, a $30 late fee makes sense. For a $1,000 rental, a $30 late fee doesn't even matter. So you want to have a $100 late fee, so your 10% of the rent is our late fees all the time. So another thing to consider with leases is pets. So what is it about pets? Well, they're really cute and cuddly. I actually really like cats myself. Most people consider them part of the family. They're not going to get rid of them. But it's a cost-benefit analysis for you. You can't just take pets and it not have it cost you anything. Some pet owners are bad pet owners, and they will destroy your properties. It happens. So there's a cost to it, but there's a benefit to it. One of the benefits is you have a larger pool of renters. And what happens when you have more demand? Price goes up. So if more people are able to rent your property, you can charge more for it. Well, what else do we do to offset the costs? Well, this is what we do. We charge an upfront deposit for pets. We actually make it non-refundable. $250 if they have pets in the property. On top of that, for every pet that they have, they're allowed to have up to 3, they have to pay $25 a month in pet rent. So that can be a lot of money over the course of the lease. It can really change the income you have coming in. We don't consider that just profit. The reason we do that is Ted over here is going to have a dog who's going to ruin the whole house, and we're not going to make our money back on that $25 a month. But Jane over here is going to have a couple cats that were perfectly fine and did well. So the good pet owners are basically paying the liability of the bad pet owners, and now we get access to that huge pool of renters that all want houses, because pet owners love houses. It doesn't work as well for apartment communities. I don't allow pets in anything larger than a duplex, because you have to deal with neighbors, they have smaller spaces, they rarely have yards. So it works great for houses, because pet owners want houses because they want a yard for their dog, and nobody else is renting to them, and so they're going to come to you, the person who actually accepts them, and they're willing to pay a premium for that as well. So that's how we get around that issue, because it is an expense, and you have to cover that expense somehow. But having access to more renters will make the base price go up, and on top of that, you're covering your expense by having extra payments from people who have the pets.
What's the extra cost?
For you, it's when they damage the property.
No, pet. How much do you charge?
Oh, $25 per pet.
Flat fee?
Per month, $25 every month per pet. So if they have 3 dogs, they pay $75 extra a month. We also don't allow vicious breeds of dogs, mainly just to protect our maintenance professionals and anybody. They are a hassle. You have to do a maintenance order. They have a pet. You kind of have to schedule it out with them because they don't want someone being there alone with the pet, things like that. They're a hassle. They're an expense. They're difficult to deal with at times. But again, you have access to a lot more people who want to rent your property, and people are willing to pay a premium for them. And so you can offset that cost with that premium, and that's how you kind of get access to all those extra people. And also, we put the $250 extra down, and that should cover some of the damages they might cause. So moving people in is another step that people sometimes forget. One of the things we do with so after you sign the lease, we always like to sign the lease before the actual move-in date. The reason for this is because I don't want them with the U-Haul in front of my office just not listening to what I'm saying and saying, I gotta sign the lease, I gotta move in right now. Because then if they don't agree to something in the lease, well, they're still gonna sign it and move in, and then we're gonna have problems down the road. Remember, I'm gonna emphasize and make sure that they're okay with these rules. If they're not okay with these rules, now they have time to go find something else and deal with someone else. It'd be someone else's problem, not my problem. Because if they're not gonna follow the rules, I don't want them. So moving them in, sign the lease beforehand. Another thing I do is I go to the property. What do I do at the property? I put in a little move-in gift. Yeah, and that's customer service. I say, hey, I care about you. I'm going to give you something you need. What do I put in the move-in gift? Plunger, light bulbs, cleaning supplies. I want them to take care of the property. I want them to know if your toilet's backing up, plunge it. I don't want you to not have a plunger. Call my maintenance professional to come out there and have to plunge your toilet for you because you forgot to get a plunger. If a light bulb happened to go out, I don't want you to be frustrated by that. Here's some for you. Here's some 409 and some paper towels. If it's dirty, clean the property, keep it nice. It's a little kind of reminder like, hey, I'm entrusting you with this, but I'm going to be responsible on my end, and I care about you as a company. We care about you. Another thing to do is do one last walk through the property. Remember that systems checklist I did a long time ago? Well, you had a lot of things on there, and you had to make sure all those things got done. Now, you should have someone who's good enough to get them done, but you want to go there and make sure it all was done. Everything's done. The cleaner was good. They didn't miss the freezer. They didn't, not clean the oven. You want to make sure all this stuff was taken care of. If it wasn't, you want to tell them when they get the keys from you, that's when you can tell them, hey, I looked at the property the other day. Usually you want this to be a day or two before they actually move in. I looked at the property. I noticed that, hey, the faucet wasn't working correctly. So we're going to get that fixed. If you tell them up front and you admit the problem, it's never going to be an issue for them. They're going to be, okay, I understand. You're looking out for me. You're being proactive about it. If they have to go and they find all these problems, they're going to be like, they're just trying to get me in here, and they don't really care. They're not being proactive. If you're proactive, it'll totally help so many problems that happen. And so you got to go and check all of those things, make sure they're all done. Also, who knows, something might have happened by the last time someone was there, and you want to catch that before they move in. You want to be the one to catch it, not them.
You ever just do a walkthrough with them?
We don't typically do that, basically because it's tough to work around their schedules a lot of the time. So It's a big hassle to do that, we've just never done it, but it can be something a lot of people do that way.
How do you handle it if, you know, like say the carpet's dirty or the vinyl's got a rip in it, or, you know, there's existing issues that really aren't gonna get fixed before they move in? I mean, how do you document, or how does your?
Well, we let them know, we have in our lease that it says, you are renting this property in as-is condition. You've seen the property, you agree to the condition of the property, or you have not seen the property and you still agree to the condition of the property, and you're okay with that. And so we're not gonna fix the little things that are messed up along the way. If you don't like the paint color, we're not changing it because we're renting it as is. If this cabinet's a little weird, we're not changing it out because it is how it is, because you rented it that way. Now, if the refrigerator breaks on you or doesn't turn on when you move in, yeah, we're gonna do maintenance issues like we need to. We're not gonna let you freeze because you moved into a property with no furnace and say, sorry, it's as is, you don't have a furnace, sucks for you. We don't do that. But anything cosmetic, anything minor, if that's the way it was when they moved in, we're not obligated to fix it, and we made them aware of that up front. But we also want to sell a quality product, so we try to not have little things that are wrong with the property. There's also a couple other things you need to do when you're moving them in. Some last items, check the keys to make sure the keys you're going to give them are the right ones. It's a terrible feeling to have someone come, pick up the keys, go to the property, you're in your office, you feel good because you just got this all done. 20 minutes later you get a call, hey, I'm here with the moving van and I can't get in the property because my keys don't work. It's a terrible feeling to have. You got to go drive down there, hope you have the right keys now, and then try to get them in there. And then if that doesn't work, you got to just change out all the locks. You got to just get the right keys, make sure you have that. Also, if your for rent sign's in the yard, take that out of the yard. Now, it's a good time to do those little things that are going on. So basically what I say is messy move-ins are more difficult than one last trip to the property. Always do that one last trip to get everything figured out.
Do you picture or document everything?
Yes, part of what we do with our marketing is basically every time someone moves out of a property, we take pictures of it, and every time we're starting to advertise it again, we take pictures of it again too. So we always have as current of pictures as possible. Often I'll do, if I didn't get it during the marketing stages, I do it during the last walkthrough to get last pictures so I see where everything's at. But if I haven't rented it for a while, if it's vacant for a while, I have time to go down there and get brand new pictures of it too, so I have better, more accurate, more current pictures of the property.
Do you allow your tenant like a 7-day, after they've moved in, and they noticed, hey, this thing's broken, not functioning properly?
We do have a checklist to get the condition of the property. That takes 7 days. But basically anything that's broken, we're going to fix. Anything that's not broken that we weren't going to fix in the first place, we're not going to do, is kind of how I see it. Yeah, I mean, it's just if it's not broken, we're not going to fix it. If it's something that's supposed to be there. If it is broken, we're just going to fix it. Now, the one thing I'll say is with like pests, I talked about this a little bit before, they basically have 30 days to let us know, hey, there's roaches in this house that you guys didn't know about it. Okay, we're going to get that taken care of. But if it's 6 months down the line, well, you know, that wasn't from the previous person who lived here. So we don't really have any sort of thing quite like that. The next thing is collecting rent. So you're done at this point. You moved them in, and you know, you have your little house. It's a nice little business. You're managing it well, and it just spits out money for you, right? It just, every month you just get a bunch of money. No, it's not quite like that. Collecting rent is work. You got to work at it. You can't just expect it to come in every month for free. You got to spend some time and effort. What do you got to do? You got to have a process. You got to follow it. What is our process? Well, there's a couple other steps, but I'm going to go over the major ones. Our process, first one, rent is due on the 1st. That's part of our process. It's late on the 2nd, and the late fee is charged on the 5th. Well, that doesn't make sense. If it's late on the 2nd, why is late fee charged on the 5th? We stay in their lease late on the 2nd, and we give them a 3-day grace period until the calendar hits number 5, and then the late fee is charged. We do that so, again, like July 4th, they can say, well, this is ridiculous. You guys are charging late fee on July 5th. You guys weren't open yesterday, and you know, it's like 1 minute late. And we're like, well, it's actually 3 days late. We had 3 days to get it to us. It was supposed to be, we were nice to you, giving you those extra days. So you have nothing you can really say about us not treating you fairly, because this was the agreement, and this is what happens. A lot of people do end up paying on the 5th anyways. We also let people mail it in, so if it's postmarked on the 4th and it comes in on the 5th, or even if it's postmarked on the 4th and it comes in on the 6th or whatever, we don't charge a late fee for that. But if we haven't received rent by the 6th, we call everybody, even if it's like a $5 balance. We just want to let them know but there's a $5 balance on their account. We try to figure out what their situation is, why haven't they paid rent, what's going on. If we still haven't gotten in contact with them or they haven't worked with us in some fashion, we give them a notice on the 10th. If it's smaller than a late fee, which is 10% of the rent, we give them what's called a balance due notice saying, hey, you need to pay this balance due notice. You need to pay that $5 or that $10 that's still on your account. If it's more than a late fee, more than 10%, we give them a 72-hour notice. We typically mail these out. I'm probably going to move towards posting them on the door because that is more effective, but currently what we do is we mail them out so that we file eviction on the 15th. If they have not contacted us, that's what happens. Sometimes this gets messed up because when weekends fall and things like that, we have a business hours and we do things typically during business hours. But this is the basic process. We follow it every single month. There aren't really any exceptions except for the other things we have. We do sign payment arrangements with people. Someone says, hey, I can't pay until the 17th. Well, we don't want to just file on the 15th knowing they're planning on paying on the 17th. Now, you can't trust everybody, but what I do, I make them come into the office. I don't make it easy for them. It's like, if you don't want to get evicted, come in the office, sign this agreement saying you're going to pay on the 17th, and follow through with that. The day you don't follow that agreement, we're filing eviction. So this is a serious thing. Don't send out 72-hour notice if you're not going to follow through on them, because then they'll lose all credibility at that point.
Do you take credit cards?
We do right now. We haven't for the most. We just started doing that like a month or two. We have a way for them to pay online or call us and pay through credit card. That is a nice way to set up too. It makes it convenient for people. So if you call them and say, "Hey, I can pay on my credit card right now," you can just get it taken care of. But we haven't had that capability for most of our business life. So we typically try to make a payment arrangement with them. And again, I'm not going to let someone make a payment arrangement 2 months in a row or 3 months in a row and just abuse the system. I'm going to set rules and guidelines that are a little more complicated than to go over right now, but have those guidelines and follow through with them every month.
Do you charge them your merchant processing fee?
Yeah, if they pay through credit card, there's a 3% fee they have to pay that, yes.
Okay.
Not for application fees, though. We kind of eat that.
Could you also explain the eviction process?
Our eviction process is when we have to file for eviction on somebody, we give them a 72-hour notice. We have a lawyer, Nick Porto. We give him all the information, and he takes care of it for us. We outsource our evictions. We do also invoice them for the charge of the eviction, which is $360 for us. So we send them an invoice once we have filed the eviction. So we try not to get to that stage because if someone can't pay their $400 of rent, as soon as we file that eviction, they now have to pay $760. So it makes it a lot harder for them to catch back up. So we try not to get to that stage, but we're not going to delay it because the more you delay it, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. You can never catch up once you get that far behind. It's really difficult. We used to do a little bit of this. There's one person we evicted once. They ended up catching back up. They got behind again. We evicted them again. They had 2 evictions on the record, but before we actually kicked them out, they paid all the money back again. So you think, okay, they caught back up. No, we evicted them a 3rd time.
Good question, did they go to Iowa after that?
We have not collected any of the money owed to us, I will say that. So if people are getting behind and constantly behind, it's better to end the relationship earlier rather than later. It's going to cost you anyways. Have a couple rules for people who end up with that bad month, but don't let it go on and on and on and on. Have some contingencies, but know what those are.
So in a situation like what you just explained, obviously they can't deal with the expense of living to that house. Do you just say, you can leave, be gone next month?
Sometimes I do. I'll talk to people, and if they can't pay, there's always a way out of an eviction. Say, hey, if you move out on this date, just move out, keep the place clean, and we'll re-rent it, and we're not going to go after you for it. You know, we're not going to go after for the money owed, but you obviously can't afford this. Go find a better situation for yourself. You can work with people in certain situations, but do something that's mutually beneficial. I'll get into, you want to be on their team in this situation. I'll get into that in a second. But don't delay with eviction. It's just going to cost you more down the road every day you delay. Did you have a question there?
Kansas City is set up where if you evict before the 10th, you can get it on the books for the next month. So we have our setup where the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd is free. 4th and 5th is $20 per day. They have to be called us by the 5th to let us know what they're doing. We don't care if they pay by the 20th, 25th, or whatever. There'll still be a $40 late fee. But they know they got to call us by then. Because if they don't call us, we already filed, and will be on the books for that following month. So you don't get those 2 and 3 months backlog. Take them to court.
I didn't know about that, so that's a good piece of advice. Apparently, if you can get on early in the month, you can get the eviction a lot sooner. I didn't know that. So another thing is you have a process, you gotta stick to it. Don't delay on it, don't make too many exceptions about it. Have rules beyond the process of what you're gonna do, because the one time you don't charge the late fee, the one time you don't call them, they kind of just, the one time you delay on your 72-hour notice, the one time you don't evict, they're just gonna respect you less and then take advantage of you more every time. So stick to the process you have, follow through with it. If it's someone who you think is really gonna pay and they keep convincing you, well, if they haven't followed through, they're not going to, even if you believe them. Have consequences. Charge a late fee. Make sure you charge a late fee. For a little while, we didn't have late fees going on. So that just made people not really care about it. Or I guess we waived them often is what we did. We did not have late fees. But if they don't have consequences, they're not going to try to get things right. Some people just pay late every single month and they pay before they get evicted. I have one resident I think is paid late every single month and they pay an extra $75 because they pay on like the 8th every month. I don't know why they do it, but they always do it. So they never do get to evict, but I call them every single month. Every month I feel like I know these people really well. They're my best friends. I call them more than my best friends because they're always late. But I stick to the process, and if they don't make it by that 15th date and they haven't done anything, they will get evicted. So you will have problem residents. This lady doesn't really look very happy. I've dealt with a lot of people like that. How do you deal with these people? Well, the first thing is remember 80-20, or in this situation, I think it was more than 9-10. 90% of the problems and difficulties you're going to have with residents is from 10% or 80% to 20% of the people that are actually renting from you. So keep that in perspective. You're going to get tired, you're going to get frustrated dealing with it, but most of the people who are going to rent from you are good people trying to do right by you, not trying to cause you a headache. So just remember that you're going to have to deal with some of these people that are going to do that. It's just part of the business. You have to be expecting it. Don't get frustrated by it. The next thing, be the good guy. What do I mean by being the good guy? You are always the good guy. Always. There is always a bad guy, and it's never you. Who is the bad guy? The bad guy is the lease. The bad guy is the owner. The bad guy is Missouri law. The bad guy is fair housing law. You have to follow those things. Your job is to fulfill the lease and fulfill the law. That's what you have to do. That's forcing you to do what you're doing. You're on their team to figure out the best solution for them. Not necessarily a good solution, but the best solution. They might still have to move because they can't pay, but you know that it's worse for them to have an eviction on their record and never be able to rent for the next 10 years. You know that's a bad result for them. So a good result for them is to move out of the property, find another solution, and that's also a good result from you. You're working with them, not against them. You are always on their team. You are the good guy. Be on their team. You are always trying to find a solution to their problem because you are not causing that problem. This is really important to know how to deal with problem residents. You are not causing the problem. Something else like the lease or the law is causing the problem. Always blame that other thing because that is what's going on. You need to fulfill the lease if you're going to do your job correctly. You need to follow the law. So do those things and be on their team to try to find the best solution. It's out of your hands because this is what the lease states. If I don't follow the lease, I have to break that same thing with the lease for everybody. You can come to a mutually beneficial agreement. You're going to come to the same mutually beneficial agreement with anybody in that situation. So be on their team. Always be on their team. Always. They're going to yell at you. They're going to be angry at you. I had someone suing us just recently. There was some miscommunication that happened on with a maintenance order. It didn't get fixed apparently, or I don't know exactly the details of the situation, but some of their property was damaged, some of their furniture and stuff was damaged due to a leak or something. I don't know what happened exactly, but she stopped paying rent because of this issue, and she ended up getting evicted for it. And then she ended up suing us for those damages. What is most people's reaction going to be? It's going to be to mad, to fight the eviction, maybe try to pay her off or something like that. You are on their team, always, even if they're suing you. You were on their team. What did I do? I brought her in, I talked to her about it, I talked to her about the options. She could continue to sue us. She lost in eviction court. We were able to prove that we tried to fix the issues, and she lost in the eviction court, so she still got evicted. So I told her, you can go through with trying to sue us, there's a chance you will win, but you know, you already lost once, it's likely you're not going to get any money from us if you try to sue us. But what I can do is, these are the reasons you moved out because these things weren't getting fixed to your level. I can go back in, I can pay some money, because it was going to be expensive for us to go through small claims court and deal with lawyers and all that time and energy. We wanted to just get past that. So I said, we're going to go back, open up the judgment, we'll get rid of the judgment we have against you. We'll do a satisfaction of the eviction, so that's not on your background report anymore. You don't have a place to live right now. I can help you with that by getting this stuff off your background report. Just, you know, drop the suit against us and we'll get this all figured out. And I was on her team trying to figure out the best solution. She didn't have to do that, but I honestly thought that was her best option because she had no guarantee of winning a small claims court. So because of that, she kind of agreed with me that was probably her best option. And by the end of the conversation, I only talked to this lady for 30 minutes after she wanted to sue us. By the end of it, she was asking us what we had available to rent. This was someone who was just suing me, and now she wants to rent from me again. That's the power of being on their team. She got evicted because she didn't follow the rules, and that's just what happens. But if you're on their team, you can get them to work with you and be amenable to what you're trying to accomplish.
Did you rent to her?
No, I chose not. I told her I'd give her a letter to explain what happened to anybody, and just so that she had that to try to find out. But I didn't want to help her out. It was a bad situation for her. She wasn't being mean about anything. And so I was trying to help her out as much as I could. I was trying to customer service. You want to be nice, but stick to your rules still. You know, don't go outside your rules by being on their team. You got to stick to what the rules you have, because if you're that buddy that one time, you can be that buddy again. And so you're going to lose credibility if you don't. You are always the good guy. The policy, owner, lease, or law is the bad guy. That is what is causing their problem, and you explain that up front. Now you are the good guy trying to help them come up with the best solution. Not necessarily a good solution, but the best solution. Quickly, I'm going to go over Section 8. There's so much to talk about here. I'm just going to go over it really quickly. It's a big question people have. We do some Section 8. What I will say about it is if you're going to do it, become an expert in it. Get really good at it. It is complicated. There's a lot of rules and things you got to figure out. Know what you're doing. Don't let that make you afraid of it. In some markets, it can make you a lot of money, but it can also cost you a lot of money if you don't do it right. So I believe right now at this second, 90% of the money owed to us is owed to us from HUD and Section 8. Not the residents that are running Section 8, but HUD not paying us yet. There's lots of difficulties with that. You got to work through lots of red tape and stuff like that. Just know what you're doing if you're going to get into it. Really become an expert at it if you're going to do it. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense, but other times it doesn't make sense to deal with. Money owed after a lease. The one thing I'll say about this is a lot of people get emotionally tied to it. Be like Elsa in Frozen, let it go. Let it go. I'm not gonna say that. That doesn't mean just don't try to get any of the money, but emotionally detach from it. It's gonna eat you alive if that person who took $10,000 from you really focuses. I don't think I have more time for questions. Can you ask that at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So just don't emotionally get involved into it. Just be okay that, you know, that's money that's in the past now. There are some things you can do to try to collect that money, but really a lot of times it ends up being good money after bad, and good time and energy after bad. Because you're spending all this emotional energy, you're trying to get, you know, judgments on people that you have to go, you have to try to skip trace people. There are things you should set up to try to get that money, but oftentimes it's more difficult than it's worth, and what you should be doing is focusing on the future. Get the money that's going to be owed to you. Make sure the situation doesn't happen again. Once it's gone, it's so hard to get that money on the back end, it's usually not really worth going after it. So try not to. Try to focus on the future money. Have a couple of situations, you know, once we evict them, we have the information, we send it off to our lawyer, they try to garnish. We've had a garnishment that paid us about $4,000 or $5,000 once. Our lawyer said it's a 1 in 100 garnishment, but you can get that money, but don't spend all your energy on that. Focus on doing it right up front. That's where your energy should go. And your ability to collect old debts really relies upon how well you screen your prospects. Like I said before, that's the most important thing I can tell you. If you're going to be able to get money from someone after the fact, it's because they had a good, stable job when you rented to them in the first place. If they move off to Iowa and you can't find them, you're never going to get that money. So, accounting and record keeping. So how do most people do their accounting and record keeping? Well, it's important, I know it, but this is what they end up doing. They're just going to do it tomorrow. Well, don't do that. Do not do that. Be like Nike. Just do it. Just do the accounting. Always do your accounting upfront as it happens, and your record keeping. You're not gonna, this is what typically happens to somebody who's doing property management. So, okay, you get some rent in, that's great. Okay, then a phone call comes in, you gotta remember what they're talking about. Oh, you get a notice coming in, oh, someone else paid a late fee, and oh, the email's coming in. You got a maintenance order, you gotta remember to take that. Okay, someone's coming to the office, you gotta talk to them, a bill comes in that you gotta pay. Okay, you gotta pick this other person, another person's giving you a note, and you gotta rent this other. You don't even know what's on the bottom of that pile anymore. This is what ends up happening. How are you going to have good records when this happens? If you have to evict someone, how are you going to find their lease? How are you going to have if we're getting sued and we need to prove that we tried to go over there, how are we going to be able to prove that? You're going to spend hours going through it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Do it up front. Take this garbage you have on your desk and clear it out and keep records of it. Just get rid of all of it. How do you do that? You do it up front. And you need to use a property management software. We use Rent Manager. I can recommend Rent Manager. I think it's really quality. It's not perfect, but I really like it. We have a saying in our office. If it's not in Rent Manager, it never happens. Everything that is in the system is what is actually transpired. So if you get a call from a resident, you say that you talked to this resident, what about? If you try to call them and don't get a hold of them, put that in Rent Manager. If there's a maintenance order, make sure it's in there. If there's an emergency maintenance order after hours, when you're back in the office, put that in Rent Manager. Have a record of every single thing. I've had people where it just tried to contact, because I couldn't get a hold of them, but I have a record of every single time I tried to do it. And it also makes communication better when you're working with the team. That's a huge aspect of property management I don't have time to get into, but if my receptionist is trying to get a hold of somebody and they haven't been able to, I can go into the account and say, okay, yeah, she is trying to get a hold of them, we just haven't been able to. That's what's going on with this account. Make sure you're keeping track of everything that's going on as it happens, because you won't once the moment is passed. AppFolio is another property management software, so is Buildium. I can't really recommend AppFolio because I've never used it before. I've heard a lot about it. It sounds good. It's really geared towards marketing and it's web-based. I've heard a lot of good things about it. I've never used it, so I can't personally recommend it. I have personally used Buildium, but only for a couple months. It's a little bit better for maybe a smaller operation. It's a little bit less expensive. Rent Manager isn't necessarily cheap, but it's very important. Buildium is a little bit less expensive. I think it gets the job done for a little less money. If you only have like 1 or 2 rentals, you could use like an Excel document or something like that, but just keep track of everything that's going on. Keep all your documents in the same place. Have a system for it. If you get more than just a couple rentals, get something like a property management software. It'll save you time and energy. One last thing here. Getting Things Done is a book I highly recommend. It's kind of more of a system for your personal workflow. I've done a couple seminars. It's by David Allen. I highly recommend it. I use this system in my day-to-day work schedule, and I believe it makes me probably 3 or 4 times more effective during the day. I don't have to stress. I know what's going on in my business. I know what I have to accomplish. I know when I can get that accomplished. It's just a good recommendation for your personal workflow of getting everything done. I'll be there in 1 second. Not keeping good records will always cost you. And it will cost you in time, stress, energy, and it will hurt your bank account. You will manage them well, your assets will be worth less because you did not keep records. So basically, just a couple of important points I went over, just so you guys know. Prepare your rental correctly. If you get all this stuff right, your asset will be worth more money. It'll produce more cash flow. Your business will be run better. You need to have resident retention. Maintenance is the best way to do that. Make sure vacancy is way too expensive to have a lot of. Get good people into your properties. I can't stress that enough. This is where most people fail. This is the biggest mistakes I ever made. I said made more mistakes in my office. The biggest mistakes I ever made was not processing well enough. That was the biggest mistake I've made as a company, and I've cost our company the most money because of that mistake I've made. Next, be on their team. If they're causing problems, always be on their team. It'll save you so many headaches. It'll save so many bad situations. And the last thing I have to say is just, a lot of people say you make your money when you buy, but you don't realize your profit until you manage. You realize your profit when you manage. That's when the money actually comes in the door. If you don't manage correctly, you will never see $1 of that good buy. So, that's what I have. I'll open up the questions that you guys might have. I think we got a couple of minutes for that.
I have a question about visitors duration. So when someone has a visitor and you've seen them a little longer than you should.
That is always a difficult situation. That is true. People will lie to you, and sometimes you cannot prove them wrong. We have it in the lease that states that nobody can be there, stay at the property for more than 20 consecutive days and over, or no, it's 10 consecutive days and like 20 days throughout the lease. It's really hard to prove. Basically, my philosophy is if I think they're living there, I give them a notice, and if they're still living there, I fine them for it. But typically, if they're not causing problems and I can't prove that they're living there, I don't do a whole lot about it because it's just going to cause headaches for yourself. So if they're that's only if I can't prove it. If I know what's happening, I got to follow my rules. But if I can't prove it, I can't prove it. If it's not causing problems, I just kind of let it go because, as far as I know, they are following the rules. I can't prove it otherwise. So it's a difficult situation. You had a question back here that I skipped.
I just wanted to know how much rent manager was, and if you looked at the Appfolio as well before you decided.
I don't know the price of Appfolio. We started using Rent Manager 4 years ago. It's $1 property for Appfolio. Rent Manager is $75 per user, so you have like a login portal. So you have to pay $75 for that, but if 2 people are going to be on it at the same time, you have to pay $75 for each of those people. And I think there's a little bit more for a startup fee, like $200 or something. I really like it. There's actually some more expensive ones out there, like One Site and stuff. I've never used those. My personal recommendation is pay more and get more when it comes to record keeping. Get something that's really going to work for you. Don't cheap it out on that. It'll save you money in the long run if you have good records.
How do you handle utilities? Do you ever include those in maybe your multifamily?
Occasionally, we have a couple vouchers that force us to, and we go with those vouchers to do all those paid. We have a duplex that is a all-on-one meter, so we do all bills paid for that one. We just charge a higher rent for that. I try not to do that because typically it costs you more money in the long run. You can't get as much rent as the utilities are going to cost you over the long run. But I always state on the lease, if the utilities are their responsibility, they're always in their name, and they're always on. If they ever come into our name, they have to pay for it, and they get fined. So those are some of the things I put with those. But sometimes there is all those pay situations.
How often do you have any furnished property?
Any what property?
Any furnished?
Furnished properties. I've never rented a furnished property in my life. So I don't know anything about doing that. I'm not the person to ask. I apologize.
Do you, when you run their background check and their credit report, do you give them a copy of it?
What we do is if we deny them, we don't. I mean, they can get it if they get approved. But if we deny them, we send them a letter, and AAA gives us. We send them a letter of the reason they were denied. It has like a bunch of different things, and we put a little X next to the one that caused them to be denied. And then AAA provides us with a letter where if they fill out their information, they can send it to AAA, and they'll get a copy of their background report so they can see for themselves. So if they say, like, you got denied because of an eviction, and they complain, well, I don't have an eviction on my record, we'll say, well, go get your background from AAA, and then they'll actually get it, and they'll get to see what actually comes back on the background report. I think this one was first, I think.
Any advice for keeping your legal fees manageable, but setting everything up straight?
I guess the best thing to do is just budget it as an expense that's going to happen. An eviction costs us about $360 to do. We always charge that against their account. Sometimes people get that charge against their account and pay off the rent plus the eviction fees. That happens sometimes.
Screening.
Yeah, but the biggest thing is screening. Yeah, the biggest thing is not screening well. There's a question over here, and I'll get to you.
Yeah, on screening, do you run all your apps at the same time?
Do we run all our apps at the same time? Yes, as soon as we get it to the office with the application fee. We do not process until we have that fee. We do send them all off, yes.
So there's no refunds on, if
There's
someone
no
got it?
There's no refunds, but with our company, what we say is your application is good for 60 days on any of our properties. So if they do miss out on the property they really wanted, we don't give them a refund, but they can rent another property from us. Sometimes people get mad because they wanted that property, but that's why I tell them, get your references in as soon as possible, and there's no guarantee when you apply that you're going to get this property. I also tell them, that's why you should fill it out at the showing. Because if you're not at the showing, we'll get back to the office sooner, we can start processing faster. So if you want this property, get the application to us now. Give them that sense of urgency. Don't let them back out without a sense of urgency.
Okay, good question. I changed the carpet, and new tenant came and they lived for 3 years, and then they left. The couple, no, actually one dog messed the whole carpet, so we had to change it. In that case, do you charge the previous tenants the carpet
The question is, do we charge the previous resident for damages to a carpet after they lived there for about 3 years or so?
Yeah, or
Yes.
before they move, we change it.
Yeah, so we change out the carpet. What we will do is we will charge them for any damages they cause. So we kind of have like the life of a carpet. And then, you know, if they ruin it after 1 year, they have to basically pay for the whole carpet at that point. If they ruin it after, you know, 3 or 4 years, maybe they'll pay for a percentage of the carpet. It's kind of how that works. So you kind of go, what is typical wear and tear? How long is this product going to last? And then you charge them what the real expense was. That's a tricky situation to get involved in, but you can make it work effectively. You have one more.
You said, the eviction, the cost is you can, send the bill to the tenant, is that right?
Yep.
Is that correct?
We charge it against their account, so we have their balance in rent manager of $450 they haven't paid plus the late fee. And then once they get evicted, we have to pay our lawyer that's actually $320. We charge them $360 because the writ costs us $40, and we just do one invoice instead of two. So now they have to pay us the $450 plus the $360 to actually make the account good. And once we start the eviction, we do not stop the eviction until the entire amount is paid. I don't care if they say, well, I can get it the week after court. No, once you get to that stage, there is no more negotiating unless it's about you leaving the property. So that's the only time we negotiate, once we have gone to court, or once we've started that process. They have to get off. If they do pay, they almost always have to stay. It's a pay-to-stay law. If they pay the balance, they can stay at that point. So actually, just a couple weeks ago, someone was rushing into the office at 4:45 the day before court to give us their $790 cashier's check. I wasn't going to accept the check, but a cashier's check to prevent their eviction that was going to happen the next day. I wasn't going to delay the court. I wasn't going to do anything until they got that money in. So.
In that case, then, if I have a property manager, do I need to tell the property manager to evict, or do I need to go to the tenant? Who doesn't?
The property manager should be doing that for you. If they are not doing a good job with that, they are probably the wrong property manager and should get somebody there.
Have you had experience, I don't see this a lot here in Kansas City, or even hear people talk about it, but have you used rental insurance? So if the tenant's a marginal tenant and you may or may not let them in, but if they would pay an extra fee to an insurance company that would pay their rent for 3 months if you had to evict them. Have you tried any of that?
I've never even really heard about that, to be honest. So no, I have not tried that. Deb seems to know as well.
Yeah, I had someone tell me about that, and I was asking this other landlord, well, how does that work? And he said, good luck in getting anyone to pass the application of the insurance company. And he said if they pass their application, they're not the ones that are going to ruin your property.
Okay.
Because I know AAA Screening has a company they recommend, but I've yet to find anybody that's actually used it, so I was see if you had any feedback on
Yeah,
that.
no, I've never heard about that before. I've never tried anything like that. We do recommend, some people say you have to have renter's insurance, which is like homeowner's insurance, and it protects their possessions inside the property in case of theft, so they don't get mad at us. We always recommend they have it and make sure they know if the house burned down or if they get stolen from, that's not our responsibility. You were supposed to have resident insurance. If you don't have that, that's your responsibility. Don't come crying to me when that happens. So, I've never heard about the other thing.
Given a lot of this, I mean, I'm pretty new to, I only have one property in that thing. Given a lot of this.
First of all, can I say congratulations on getting your first? That's the hardest one.
I mean, I don't really see a lot of these issues. Like, I mean, couldn't it be easier to just use a property management company and they do all that for you?
Sometimes it is, but like I said, there are risks. And again, the better it is managed, the more it is worth. We manage ourselves because we feel like we care about it more. We're going to do a better job. We won't necessarily do a better job than every property manager, but the value of our assets is dependent on how well it is managed. You're going to care about it more. You can become better than other people, so we choose to do it ourselves. Now, sometimes it doesn't make sense to do it yourself. There's a lot of reasons why it doesn't make sense. But also, like I talked about in the beginning, there's a lot of risk with having a property manager. Fraud can happen. They can do a really bad job with it. So if you're going to get a property manager, you need to know this stuff so you know if they're doing a good job or not. It's really important to be able to manage, even if you have a property management company doing it for you. How much time we got?
If your existing resident is asking for a 2-year lease extension, can you get a premium rent on that since you're locked out of the market this year?
Typically, people think of it the other way, residents. They will think if they're going to sign a 2-year, they should be getting a discount. That's typically how people think about it, on their aspect of it. Maybe not everybody. You can ask for it. You can ask for anything. But typically, people will not sign a 2-year lease unless they get kind of less payment for it. That's kind of how they think of it. And so I never tried to ask for it before, to be honest. So did that answer your question?
I have experience with that.
Oh, go ahead.
We offer like a half-month discount. I mean, so it's not anything that's really big. You probably would pay that much if it was sitting there after a year where you were trying to rent it again. So we give a half-month discount on the rent, and it's a 2-year lease, which means that you aren't going to have to worry about it being empty all the time. And they seem to like that because they know that their rent isn't going to go up in a year.
Yeah.
So they consider it a win.
On the rental leases, is it more normal, because I've not rented much, to have like a year lease and then after that it automatically go to another year? Or is it normal to go from a year and then go month to month at the end of that point?
What I've normally seen, and I may be mistaken, but what I've normally seen is your leases transfer to month leases. That's what I normally see. Mainly because it is kind of weird for someone to accidentally get locked into a year. Remember, if they give me a notice on the 2nd of the month when their lease is going to expire in 29 days, legally they're locked in for a whole nother year whether they want to be or not. So I don't really like that situation ever occurring. That's one of the reasons we do month to month. That's what I typically see, is it rolling over to month to month. I've seen the other way around, and you end up just getting people who don't want to live there, or you're kind of having to break the rules anyways. I just feels like it causes problems of tension that I don't really want. So
Somebody stops paying the rent, how long does it take to evict them?
that is a good question, mainly because it depends on how quickly you file, how quickly the servicer can get out there, and how quickly you get a court date. And then once you actually have gotten the judgment against them, how quickly you get the sheriff out there. These all vary depending on just when you do it, how good of a lawyer or how well you're doing it yourself, how good of a servicing company they're using. I've heard people being able to get it done in about a month or a month and a half in Kansas City, and I've had evictions that took 4 months to go through. You know, they tried to serve them and they couldn't, something happened, and then they never went out there, and then it got served. It can turn into kind of a nightmare situation where they're just there, they're not leaving, they're not getting evicted, but you can do things to do it. We outsource most of our eviction stuff. We feel like our lawyer does a pretty good job with it, and so I kind of give it to him, and then all I have to deal with, are they paying or are they not paying, or can I get them to move? That's what I do with.
And those legal fees you're paying the lawyer, does that cover the sheriff?
Yeah, so our fees we pay to our lawyer, first we pay $320 for the court fees and everything that the lawyer does, and then there's a $40 writ that we have to pay to get the sheriff out there afterwards. We just put it all in one invoice of $360 and send it to the resident.
Have you run into seasonal issues around month-to-month leasing? For example, Christmas time, nobody wants to move, it's cold in Kansas City, that kind of thing?
I haven't experienced a large amount of that. I've actually just been kind of thinking about this whole idea a lot recently, just because we went through winter and stuff like that. I noticed my leasing didn't really go down in winter. The whole kind of expectation is that people don't move in winter, so you shouldn't have vacancies in winter. I didn't have that problem this last winter, so I'm kind of rethinking this. And a lot of people didn't want their lease to end in winter because if it did, they weren't going to move. So I don't really know what to think about it anymore. Things have kind of turned around on me a little bit, but you know, it's harder when things are vacant in the winter because you have to make sure the pipes aren't going to freeze over. You want your property taken care of in the winter. So it's worse to have vacancies in the winter. But also, you know, people might feel locked in if they have a year lease and they don't want to pay the extra money. They might decide to stay again because they don't want to move that winter. So I say try to have your leases in the spring through the fall. It's just kind of better for you. But you know, think a little more critically about that, about what's actually transpiring. Keep records, see what has happened, what's actually transpired. How many move-outs do you have in winter compared to summer? How many move-ins do you have? Keep records of that kind of stuff and figure out what's best for you.
One more question.
Okay, one last question.
What's your vacancy rate? Is there a way to find a vacancy rate for an area if you're shopping an area?
What I will say is a vacancy rate is completely determined on how well you manage it. An area may have a 20% vacancy, but you might have a 0% vacancy because you manage really well. An area might have a 5% vacancy and you have a 20% vacancy because you're priced too high. So look at how much is available in the area. And this is one thing I forgot to mention when I talked about trying to price your rental correctly. If you have you know, you're seeing stuff around there trending for about 850 or so, and you see like 10 rentals right around it. You can't price yours at 850 and expect it to rent. There's high vacancy at that price. So you gotta have to undercut the market at that point to actually get your property rented. So lower end areas of higher vacancy, typically higher end areas, least some would have almost no vacancy because stuff gets rented so fast. Raytown, it takes a while. You just kind of have to learn from experience. There's no real hard numbers, and it's all dependent on how quickly you can find that one perfect resident and how well you are at managing and keeping people there. So that's my question.
You can find some numbers like on citydata.com and CLR search for like zip codes or areas. I'm not 100% sure how reliable it is, but they do have vacancy rates.
So thank you very much for listening to me talk about property management.